Well, hello, and welcome. And let me get my co-host on the screen here. Carls, you literally logged on while that countdown was on the screen. I would love to give you a hard time about it, but I'm not gonna because you've had a hell of a day.
I have had a hell of a day. I've been a busy girl. I have been very busy learning the legalese of the Victorian Parliament and lodging petitions for castle law in our...
I believe you've been causing trouble again. I think that's the scuttlebutt that I heard from my insiders down in Spring Street.
I'm wondering just how delicate that line is before I get arrested, and I'm just sort of towing it.
Oh, no, I stomped all over that line. That's, look, you should just disregard the line completely, pretend it's not there. Other people will be sure to tell you after you've crossed it. They'll let you know. Don't you worry about that.
You know those like Facebook or like Instagram checklists that pop up? You know those fun little things like tick off the ones that you've done? And there's
Yes.
always one that's like, have been arrested, and it's the only box I can't tick. So
I know I can tick that one. That's I got that one. You know, eating raw oysters, done that. Don't plan on doing that again. You know, snot of the sea, I've done that. Never had a tattoo. That's the one that I can't tick that you most certainly can.
Yeah, I've got one too many of those, actually, to be honest.
You got a few of those?
I do.
All
now,
right. Well,
sorry, go.
No, it's all right. I'm getting an echo. Are you playing my audio differently to normal? Because I can hear myself back.
Oh, is that any better? Hang on.
I don't know. If I do some talking, then I'll find out. Yeah, that sounds better. Well, now I can't hear you at all. That's fantastic. That's perfect. I mean, if we could just do the show like this, what do you reckon, Oddies? How good would that be? Just Carl's on mute the whole time. No, I haven't got you at all. No, nothing. You're gone. This is quality. This is quality entertainment, everybody.
That.
Hey, there we go. We got you back right at the end there.
I was using my MacBook microphone instead of this one, so yeah.
Don't do that. I think we're good now. I can't hear my echo anymore.
Excellent. So, can I tell you a story?
You certainly can, but also this is the nicest thing anyone said to me all day. Morning, evening with Dum Dum and Carls. Thank you. Dum Dum is reporting for duty.
Is that Klaus Schwab? Is he coming in all the way from Switzerland or wherever he lives?
Look, probably, but regardless, I take that as a compliment. So, yes, you're gonna have a whinge or something about your day.
I will in a second, but Oddies, are we Oddies or are we Oddites? Has anyone collectively decided?
Okay, so I kind of forced everybody's hand here by posting on our behalf before the show started. I said, Oddies assemble. And Big Fella replied, Oddie reporting for duty. So I think that pretty much settles it. I think we are Oddies.
We are the Oddies.
And welcome, Oddies.
I love being weird. Can I just tell you, life is so much more fun when you're eccentric because people know you're eccentric, so they just let you go. Whereas if you're just a little bit weird, but you still toe that line between trying to be normal and like reject your weirdness, people are like, oh, well, you're weird. Whereas if you're just eccentric and odd, people are like, this is her. But she's nuts.
You know the difference. You know the difference between eccentric and crazy, right? It's how much money you have. If you're rich, you're eccentric. If you're poor, you're crazy. That's the difference. So I hope to someday be rich enough to be eccentric.
Do you want to know what's funny is I think my boyfriend was trying to stitch me up because he gave me he's like, everything's upstairs ready to go. And he gave me his glass of Coke instead of my normal glass of Coke. And his is with scotch. So it could have been a totally different show.
Look, that would have been hilarious because your liver is not prepared. Your liver has not been training for that moment.
I actually think if I just had a glass of wine on the podcast, you guys would just lose your shit because it'd be hilarious. I reckon a thimble of alcohol would set me off.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that'd be great. So how about so me on mushrooms and you on wine, and we'll just see what happens.
Guys, just like not that we're encouraging any recreational drug use, but has anyone foraged and not done the old death cap, but the old psilocybin? Let me know in the comments.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I have a story.
Yeah.
I want to tell you a tale of a faraway land.
I see.
A faraway land. A land where you could say things don't quite make sense, but yet they exist and they unfold the way they do.
This is like a parallel universe to our own.
It is. It is. So just enjoy this story as I tell it. So I want you to imagine you're in a university theatre and you're listening to a lecture from a prestigious law person, someone who has a decorated career of 45 years, and so decorated that they have actually received the Order of Australia medal. Can
Oh,
you
wow.
can you imagine this? I want you guys to think about this.
I
Close your
I just,
eyes, listen to the
I'm
story.
getting into my story receiving mode here. I'm just getting fully into the zone here.
Right? So you're in your university lecture theatre, and this
Mm.
prestigious gentleman is in front of everyone talking to you about the justice system and how important your job is as a future legal person. And you're listening to this insanely decorated person, and they're showing you slides, and you're nodding along, going, yes, I want a career as prolific as this man.
I
And
see.
in between breaths, as he's changing his slides, you see something pop up. And it jars you because it's not just another PowerPoint presentation. It looks a little bit odd. It looks a little bit like something you maybe shouldn't be looking at because,
Oh.
you're in a university lecture about the law. And what you're looking at looks a lot like something that would put you in jail, right? So let's just
I think I see where you're going here. Yes.
let's hazard a guess. Let's just make something up. Let's say it's child abuse material. Yeah. That seems like, I
Hypothetically.
think we can all agree, hypothetically speaking, that
Yeah.
child pornography in a university lecture would be a no-go. It would be a non-good thing to do, right? Particularly if you had a 45-year decorated legal career and an Order of Australia medal, correct?
And hypothetically, if you had actually been a judge as part of that 45-year career, look, I could see how that would be less than ideal, but such a thing is absurd. That would never happen in real life,
It would
Carly.
never happen. This is why this is just a story. So, this never happened. But one would imagine, of course, that if the rules of the law do in fact say that anyone possessing, showing, or distributing child pornography should be held to the full extent of the law, you would imagine that regardless whether this person was a decorated law profession himself or was in fact the janitor, the cleaner of the lecture theatre, they should be held accountable for their actions. Correct?
Well, Carly, the law is blind. The law shows no favoritism for one person, no fear and no favor. I have full faith in our justice system that they would not be a respecter of persons.
Exactly. Because that is how the legal and justice system should operate. But as I said, this is a parallel universe. Right. This is a parallel universe. So imagine, because obviously legal profession, 45 years, you've probably accumulated yourself a little bit of a nest egg. You probably got a little bit of coin in the bank account, yeah?
Yeah. I'd say.
So one would imagine if you were going to, say, jet set over to Europe, you'd probably splash a bit of cash.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be an expensive trip, but I mean, obviously that would be completely out of the question because the moment you showed such objectionable material in public, you would of course be remanded in custody until you had your day in court.
Well, obviously. I mean, if you're going to show child pornography in a university lecture, you would imagine that you won't be going to Europe. But
I mean,
remember,
why are we even talking about this? Why are we even talking about this, Carly? It's so obvious. You would be in prison.
It's so obvious. But again, it's a parallel universe. So imagine, if you will, that judge is yet to face the court, but has in fact been granted special bail considerations to in fact go on that very expensive European holiday because, and I quote, it was a very expensive holiday that he has paid for. So, I mean, nothing like that could ever happen in our world. It just happens in this magical faraway land called Victoria, where you can show child pornography in a university lecture and be allowed to go travel the world on your very expensive European holiday.
See, this does actually make sense to me because in that same strange, not far away enough land of Victoria, sadly still close enough that I can see it from my front porch, I've heard tales in this parallel universe of people committing some pretty heinous, violent crimes. Not once, Carly. In fact, not even twice. you're not going to believe me when I say this, as many as 400 times, and still being released on bail.
I mean,
So,
that does sound pretty ridiculous. I mean, I can't imagine that ever happening. It
if I
almost
was to write
sounds
that,
sorry, but I just feel like it's worth connecting it to this analogy, but it almost sounds as ridiculous as spending $13 million of taxpayer funds on 40 machete collection bins. I mean, no one would make that decision. That's just ridiculous. That's ludicrous.
just off the top of my head, that's something like $350,000 per bin. And last time I checked, you could afford, if you wanted a metal box for $350,000 in Melbourne, you could probably afford a late model Ferrari, or perhaps an older aeroplane. I mean, that's a tin can that flies through the sky. If you were happy to settle for one that was maybe 20 years old, that sort of money could get you a flying metal box. Carly, what was so special about these metal boxes that made them so incredibly valuable that they're the same price as a Ferrari or indeed a secondhand plane?
Well, in these faraway lands, the faraway land of Victoria, you see there's this system, and it might be a little bit complicated for you plebs at home to understand, but I'm going to explain this very complicated system, because once I do, you'll be like, obviously, that's why it costs $13 million.
I'm sure it makes sense.
Imagine, if you will, the raw materials and then having to fabricate these metal boxes. What you guys think is quite simple is actually incredibly complicated, because I want you to imagine just how difficult the installation process is. So, for example, we are going to need 2 people holding stop and go signs at either end of the street. We're probably going to need 4 people sitting in a gutter, smoking a cigarette, drinking a Dare iced coffee, and scrolling Instagram. We are going to need at least 3 months of a executive committee sitting there, maybe shuffling the odd paperwork, and we're going to need to send at least 6 emails, at least. And then the person who fabricates this will obviously, they're part of the CFMEU, so when you get that government grant, you sort of go, I'll just add 2 extra zeros to the end. So you see, when you understand the process, well, duh, 13 million.
But Carly, that's not even the half of it. What you haven't taken into account is the necessary site safety inspections. Someone with a clipboard has to stand there and look at the piece of pavement where they're going to put the bin. And they may need to have a tape measure just to check that there's enough room for a wheelchair to get past, or something like that. But actually, you've overlooked the real problem here, and it does make sense. I promise you, everyone, you will slap your forehead and go, "Oh, obviously, of course." These boxes, I don't know if you're aware of this, are welded, and just stick with me here. Welding requires electricity, and have you seen the price of electricity recently? It makes sense. 350 grand a box.
It's a shame they're not friends with Abby Chatfield, because she has solar and her electricity is free. So they could have saved themselves a couple of dollars.
Tell you what, just build them in Abby Chatfield's garage. Yep, that would have worked.
You know?
I mean,
and for those of you who are unable
she talks
to,
a lot about her box.
She does. For those of you who are unable to detect sarcasm, these are in fact real stories from Victoria.
James has defeated us all. James is the final boss. He points out that someone has to affix the stickers.
Shit, James, you got me there. You got me.
And do you remember what those stickers say, Carly? We have discussed this previously.
This is very important. This is the part, the piece de resistance, that absolutely drives it home for everyone. If you are going to ask a 14-year-old criminal, wannabe gangster, to deposit their machete, it's best that you do ask them to please remove their packaging prior to placing it in the bin, because that is very important.
I couldn't help but notice that they didn't have the foresight to put a recycling bin next to the machete disposal bin, so that they can put the cardboard or plastic, maybe the plastic sleeve that protected the sheath when they bought it off Wish. That plastic sleeve obviously needs to go into recycling. So that is a bit of an oversight. They probably could have doubled the price, doubled the budget, if they had have just remembered to include the recycling bin.
You know, all seriousness, I'm in the wrong profession, man. I should be like, just, you call us grifters, fucking hell. This government sure does know how to waste some money.
I just recorded a video on the Great Barrier Reef today that'll be coming out tomorrow. And you remember that $443 million grant that was handed out to a previously basically unknown Great Barrier Reef Foundation? This was a decision made by Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. It was a captain's call. They did no tenders. There was no kind of scope for the project or knowledge of what the money was going to be spent on. And it's actually, I've discovered in my research for this particular story, the Great Barrier Reef Foundation was not aware that they were going to receive the money. They found out about it when it was announced publicly, or at least that's the official story. And they had 6 full-time employees at the time that the grant was given. So a $443 million grant was given to an organization with 6 employees that didn't know the money was coming. And that's just the beginning of the story. So I've got that video coming out tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, the ability of these people to spend vast sums of money on not enough to justify those sorts of numbers. And yet they keep on doing it over and over again.
Do you know what's interesting is, I don't know if people have considered this. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but the government can fix this tomorrow. Like, it's that simple. They could effectively stop all this overnight if they wanted to. The fact that they're not tells you all you need to know. They don't want to. It's that straightforward. There is nothing that needs to happen other than Jacinta Allen gets up tomorrow and says, that's it, you're done. But instead, she gives us platitudes, which is $13 million worth of machete amnesty bins. She gives us these big speeches about how we're going to have the toughest bail reform in the country. Yet last night, 2 men are now in hospital for confronting someone during a home invasion. Every fucking night we hear the same story, to the point where, weirdly, and I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, mainstream media is actually on our fucking side. It's wild. I am watching 7 News put up clip after clip after clip. I'm like, wait, did I write that story? That sounds like something I'd say.
It's nice of them to catch up, because I've only been releasing those stories, you know, on and off for the last sort of 2 years and relentlessly for the last 6 months since I went full time doing this. It's weird. It's a strange feeling. I know what you mean, Carly, to be watching these things cross my feed, because I don't watch the mainstream media, obviously, but they cross my feed on Facebook and elsewhere, because, you know, I'm out there looking, and to go, oh, that's basically a video that I wrote a few months ago, but now it's coming from them. It is quite strange.
It's interesting because for those who aren't aware, I think you sent out an email saying this today, but I put a petition forward to the Legislative Council that is being sponsored by David Limbrick from the Libertarian Party. And essentially we are demanding that Jacinta Allen change the self-defense laws and take a leaf out of Britain's book and basically put into legislation castle law. And first things first, I want every single one of you guys who lives in Victoria, you got to live in Victoria, to go and sign this petition. It's incredibly important. I am going to post it in the link in 2 seconds. But I don't think people realize how simple this shit is. But yet the government's refusing to take action. So on Wednesday, I'll be with David Limbrick on the steps of Parliament. God help me, being in front of media again. Hopefully they're kind.
You love it. You love it.
And interestingly, I know that old mate Paul Dowsley may be there. So I am going to love looking that man in the eye.
Listen, I know you and I have had very different experiences with Paul. And your experience is valid. And the way he stitched you up was not okay. But I will say that as much as he was hated by a lot of the people in the protests because he was the one covering it all the time, if you actually go back now without the heat of the moment and have a look at the way that he said what he said, in my opinion, he was dancing the line and going as far as he could to be honest about us without losing his job. Now, keep in mind that being honest about us does include some ruffians who did some things under our banner and in our name that they should never have done. And he talked about that as well. So people can point to that and go, oh, he was on the other side. No, I'm not so sure that he was. I think he was actually doing the best that he could within the realities of keeping his job. And we can debate whether he should have cared about that or not, but that's a different story. Look, I know you're not a fan of his. I don't expect you to be. You've got good reason not to be. But I certainly don't consider him to be the worst of the worst.
My issue with Paul is that for someone who calls himself a journalist, and this is my personal experience, so I can tell you this from, the horse's mouth, is that he got handed a story and didn't even bother to check the facts. And I know that because I had all the paperwork in my hand and I gave it to him. And I had the fact, I'm not going to rehash the story, but I had all of the information that disproved all of those allegations. And do you know what he did with it? He literally put it away. He didn't even open it. So don't tell me you're a fucking journalist. You got given a story, it was a hit piece, and you ran with it. And he salivated over it. And I cannot have any respect for someone who's that disingenuous. Sorry.
And like I said, your experience with him is real, and you're not going to change your mind on him, and I'm not asking you to. But my experience with him was that I think he walked the line in the case of the lockdowns and the protests. I think he walked the line as much as he could. I actually agreed to go on to a couple of his stories, and he never stitched me up. He wasn't as favorable to me as I might have liked in an ideal world. But again, I think he was walking that line. So different experiences with the same person. Jared, does anyone have the government's number? I have a bridge, an Eiffel Tower, and the idea for a department of silly walks to sell them. Would you please stop giving them ideas? They don't need more.
Can you, Topher, tell me if I post the link to our petition, can I pin that? Can you guys click on that? I don't know how this works.
I think you'd have to pin it in YouTube itself. I don't think you can pin it from within StreamYard. Yeah, you'd have to duck across to YouTube and pin it there.
All right, friends. Well, please make sure you and this is the other thing too, just so everyone knows, when it comes to the petition, the reason we need 10,000 signatures is then it has to be read in Parliament. So we can petition the government, but if it falls short of 10,000 Victorian constituents, then it just gets tabled and doesn't necessarily have to get debated. Whereas 10,000 plus, David Limbrick then has to bring it up and it has to get debated. So that's why we really push you guys. So everyone who says that we're not doing anything, this is your opportunity. All you have to do is give them, I know you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to give the government my address. They already have these details, guys.
They've already got it.
The ATO already has it,
Yeah. There's a couple of important points there. The way you phrased it was slightly ambiguous. So let me clarify. David Limbrick is looking forward to tabling this. It's not that he has to table it. But yes, that is the procedure where once it receives 10,000 signatures, it is a requirement that Parliament has to allow it to be read out within Parliament. And David Limbrick is looking forward to doing that. But also there's a lot of people who say, oh, we've signed the petitions. It didn't do anything. Most likely what you signed was like a change.org or something like that. And if you go back in my history, you'll find it's exceptionally rare that I will ever pass on anything other than an actual parliamentary petition. Every now and again, I will pass on something else if it's for something else. But if it's for lobbying government, it's a parliamentary petition or it's nothing. It is completely meaningless. And unfortunately, there are people out there, there are organizations out there that use petitions as a way of harvesting users' information, building their database, being able to reach out to you afterwards and say, hey, we need money. And unfortunately, there are organizations that are cynical enough that they just view that as basically building their business. I'm not one of those people, so I don't do that myself. But the key thing, there's two key things with parliamentary petitions that make them valuable. Number one, the person who sponsors the petition, in this case, Carly and David Limbrick, do not get your details, right? Your personal information is not passed on. Whereas with change.org, the person who ran the petition gets all your information. And number two, because it's run on the government's own servers, they have a much higher degree of confidence that it's not being gamed in some way. And so it holds a lot more weight. And like Carly said, once there's 10,000 signatures, it has to get read out in Parliament. Now, I interviewed David Limbrick today about this, and I released that interview earlier today on my YouTube channel, Topher Field. He is actually quite optimistic that this could receive the necessary support. He's got some reforms he wants to do. And unfortunately, yes, there's a process. We all want results now. We all want to wake up tomorrow morning and be told that the law's changed and we can now defend ourselves without fear of being prosecuted by the police. Unfortunately, things just can't move that quickly. There is a process, whether we like it or not. But David is actually quietly optimistic that there is so much anger in the community now. The police are on his side. This is what he was saying. The police are in agreement. The media are in agreement. A very, very significant proportion of the people of Victoria are in agreement. And this could be turned into the issue that will decide the next election. And Jacinta Allen needs to be watching that carefully. And if we can turn it into an election-winning issue, Jacinta Allen will have to flip and support this.
Well, what's interesting about this is I actually do think Labor is playing into this. They know that if they come in at the 11th hour as the knight in shining armor going, hey guys, look what we did. We fixed the whole problem just before the election. They can run on this. So in a weird way, I think they're actually delaying doing anything so that they can run on this as an election issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to be
and unfortunately, politics is that cynical. Politics is absolutely that cynical.
I am going to try and pin this to the live. So if you hear us talking, you know why.
Daniel Brune, good evening, and thank you for watching the show and drinking redemption bourbon. I think it sounds fitting thus far. Indeed. What we're proving, Carly, is that the slippery slope is real because a few years ago, all you did, little old innocent you, was put up an Instagram video sharing your experiences as a small business owner, experiences that were shared amongst many Victorians, and that's why that video went viral. But that was just the gateway drug, Carly. That was just the gateway drug. And look at you, just a few years later, you've slid down that slippery slope and you're going to be standing on the steps of Parliament as a true blue rabble-rousing troublemaker with parliamentary petitions and everything.
I think they're all going, fuck. We mucked around with the wrong chick because I think they thought that, oh, she'll go away now. And then they're like, oh, shit. It's like Medusa. They cut my head off and spawned 20,000 others.
So do you remember?
Bigger than the one before it.
Do you remember, and you may not because you were in the thick of, you were in a living hell at the time. And I mean that as about as close to literally as you can be without actual flames. So you may not remember this, but I'll try and jog your memory. Do you remember that a group came to you purporting to be crisis management people and saying that they would help you, right? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then you thankfully came to me and you said, hey, this doesn't feel right. There's something about this that's off. And we went through what they'd said to you. And quite literally what they said was, hey, we do this professionally. We normally charge a lot of money, but we're going to do it for you for free, right? Now, some people can do that sincerely, but sometimes what that means is there's something else at play. There's another agenda at play. Do you remember what their advice to you was? Yeah,
that's it. Go away. Never show your face again. Get off the internet.
Log off, shut down all your accounts. You will never be able to go online again. That was their advice to you. And they came to you pretending to be a friend.
Yes, indeed.
Now, I don't think they did that for free, and I don't think they did that as a friend. I think someone saw you and spent money engaging their services to try and get you out of the fight for good. And I'm very glad they failed.
I'm not going to say who it was, but I actually know who it was. And it was a sitting MP at the time.
Well, there you go. Okay. Well, whatever it is, I don't know what that is. So whatever happened sounds like it is exactly what I sensed. So yeah,
it was deliberate. And as was the hit job on me, I happen to know that it was definitely the private cabinet of the Premier that did what they did. So
was it? Trolia, you're late. We've only got half the number of comments that we should have by this stage of the show.
Bloody hell, Amanda. Come on.
Pull your socks up. I don't care what woke stuff you were doing. It's less important than we are. You need to show up on time in future. Otherwise, you'll be fired. They're there.
I was talking to Tim Quilty today about those boxes in Melbourne, and he was saying the majority of the cost is chewed up paying the layers of bureaucrats involved. Of course it is. Of course it is. This is the red tape thing. And if you guys remember last week, I talked about, it was specifically about Queensland, but they had a productivity council. I'm not lying. That's it. It's called the Productivity Council, whose job is to form a committee to then go and look at how productive businesses can be. And what they found was this was just to sell a simple cup of coffee in Brisbane. There were 31 steps of regulation a cafe or wherever had to jump through to be able to sell you that cup of coffee. So when it comes to the boxes, of course, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love this one. The CFMEU probably needed a crane. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the thing is, corruption in this country doesn't happen with brown paper bags anymore because it doesn't have
No.
to. It happens in plain sight. A lot of it happens in the area of consultants. An enormous amount of what passes for consultancy is actually just a cover for money laundering and for corruption. There's a reason why the Victorian government, for example, just to cite, well, I'm not saying there's specific corruption here, but I'm just as an illustration, they've spent, what is it now, $300 million on consultants around a proposed Victorian treaty. How do you get to $300 million? How could there possibly be $300 million worth of advice to give and consultations to have? The answer is there aren't. There aren't. They're paying for something else.
Yeah. Just on this comment here, Sir Pitt, I went to Salesian because I was a little private school twat, just so you know. Sunbury, good old days, eh? Yeah. On the 300 million, so can we talk about Jerome Weimer? You know who I'm talking about? Good old mate Jerome.
Yeah. Like shaved head dude. Why do I know the name?
Yeah, so he's he has run every department into the ground and keeps getting a pay rise. So he was on transport, then moved across to the COVID Commission, then moved across to the Commonwealth Games Commission, now is on the suburban rail loop, and old mate Jerome is on almost $700,000. So 2 things happening here. One, either Jerome has some dirty big secrets that he is holding the Labor Party to hostage with, or he is really good at fellatio. I don't know.
There's something going on there because the results, this is the thing. You look at any of these people and you ask themselves, if they were in the private sector, would they have gotten to where they are? And the answer is obviously no. There's a private sector reality, an unfortunate private sector reality. There's a saying I'm sure you've heard, everyone gets promoted to their own level of incompetence. And this is a problem that particularly large organizations really struggle with. Someone comes in, they do a really good job, they get a promotion. They do a really good job, they get a promotion. They do a better than average job, they get a promotion. They do an okay job, but they're seen as a rising star at this point. So they get that one last promotion and they end up above their real genuine pay grade. And then once you've promoted them all the way up to their level of incompetence, where they're no longer competent to do the job, that's where they either get stuck or in the end they get shuffled out. Right. And it's an unfortunate dynamic. It's just a real world kind of thing. It's a little bit hard to avoid, to be honest. But what happens in the public sector, they have reverse incentives. So instead of running over budget being a bad thing, as it is in the private sector, running over budget is a good thing in the public sector because it means that you need a bigger budget next year. You can go back to the government of the day and say, well, this is proof that we need a bigger budget. And in bureaucracies, you've got to understand the senior brass in a bureaucracy get paid according to a certain level structure. And the level that you're on is determined by the budget that you manage and the number of staff underneath you. So the bigger your department gets, the bigger your paycheck gets. I'm slightly simplifying, but that's broadly speaking how it works. Yeah. So you have a personal vested financial interest in running over budget and over time and needing more money and more staff because that bumps you up a level and you can get more pay. So instead of in the private sector, everyone gets promoted up to their level of incompetence and stops. What happens in the public sector is it seeks out incompetence and rewards it and lifts it up to the highest levels.
Yeah. I just thought we could indulge in his LinkedIn profile and just have a look at what Jerome's been up to. So let's just rewind back here. So obviously was in the UK for an extended point of time, has come to Australia and landed himself a chair of the board position. Interesting. Wow. And then transfers across into Department of Transport and becomes the head of transport services.
Yep. And makes perfect sense. Yep.
Executive Director, Performance and Contract Management, which is interesting because then he gets moved over to become the CEO of Vic Roads. Of course, because who better to run the COVID-19 response than the CEO and the Minister for Transport than Jerome Weimer, who became the commander of the COVID-19 response.
Oh, yeah.
And then moved across into the chief executive officer of setting up the organizing committee for the 2026 Commonwealth Games, which we cancelled, and they cost us, what was it? $500 million to not host them.
Listen,
and then, of course,
hang on. That's cheap at twice the price. We paid $1 billion to not build the Eastlink freeway link into the Western Ring Road.
And then went on to essentially build it anyway. So we paid $1 billion to not build the road, and then we built parts of it.
Parts of it, yeah.
Now, then he became the Deputy Secretary Housing Statement Implementation. Don't know what that he did there. And now he's the Secretary of the Department of Transport and Planning. And old mate Jerome is on heavy money for this.
So hang on, I'm just trying to put that career together. So he's in, what was he in before transport?
Hang on, let me go back to his thing.
Early on.
So he started his position in a Greater London Authority of Transport and Performance.
Okay, so he started in transport.
And then he was Chief Operating Officer for the Transport for London in London. This is in 2000 and hang on a minute. How did he get ballooned to these senior positions so quickly? None of this makes sense. Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. We're going to go back into this. All right. Let's scroll back to his LinkedIn.
Can I give you my punchline first? That it all makes sense because as the Minister for Transport, he didn't see them as potholes. He saw them as stadiums for the upcoming Commonwealth Games.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's not one of your best, but
you got to take the bad with the good. It's mostly bad, but you got to take the bad with the good.
So here we go. He was a senior consultant, worked on major restructuring programs for the financial services sector. He's not very good at that. It had a large government department. Okay, so he's been in government since day one. Professional advisory work for private and public sector clients, right? Senior economist, and then interim director of performance in transport. Then he comes across to Transport for London. Then he comes across to MD Transport, also in London. And then moves across to authority member, non-executive for the British Transport Police Authority. Then Chief Operating Officer of the UK Bus Service. And then parachutes into chair of the board for V-Line when he moves to Australia.
And that went well. That went brilliantly. Yeah. Yep. I can completely, that makes perfect sense.
Everything this guy touches turns to absolute shit.
But that's why he gets promoted in the public service. That's literally, that's all your resume has to say is everything I touch turns to shit. I have the reverse Midas touch and you'll get promoted.
What's his current salary? Hang on, this is going to make us all angry. What is Jerome Weiner's salary? Let's live Google. It is $762,000.
Is that all? That's a week, yeah?
That's
I wouldn't want to insult him. A man of his talent, I wouldn't want to insult him.
All his perks and under the table handshakes.
Well, see, this is the thing. They don't need the under the table handshakes anymore. What goes on? Well, this is part of the and thank you, Riot9, for the compliment there. I'm glad you appreciated my my frogs and crocodiles video. I did. I was fairly happy with a few of those puns in there as well. The corruption in plain sight. Corruption doesn't. We don't think it's corruption because it's not brown paper bags anymore. Have a look, and I've thought about doing a video on this, but the research side of it is just a bit too time consuming. Have a look at how many defense ministers, for example, federal Australian defense ministers, have retired from politics and immediately been given cushy, well-paid board positions on defense contractors and defense contracting companies. Usually the ones that they gave big defense contracts to. Now, the excuse, the narrative is that these companies need people on the board who have experience in government because they deal with government all the time. And so they need their advice and their perspective and blah, blah, blah. That's the narrative. But what's happening in practice is this person, while they're a minister, hands a multi-billion-dollar contract over to that manufacturing company, and as soon as they retire from politics, they receive a multi-million-dollar a year board position from the company that they awarded a multi-billion-dollar contract to. And this happens with enough regularity across enough different, this is not unique to defense, and it's not every single one of them, by the way, but it's a very significant proportion that you have to start to wonder, is this actually just an open secret, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine type of arrangement where it's simply expected? If I give you that contract, we don't have to sign anything. It's just a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You're going to look after me afterwards. Because if you don't, then my replacement, the new defense minister, is going to be looking at that going, I better give the contract to somebody else. right? And so it goes on through generation after generation of politicians. Corruption in this country mostly happens in plain sight.
Yeah. Do you know what? You'll be proud of me. I was doing a little bit of research today, and I
I'm
came across
always
this.
proud of you, Carly.
Oh, stop it! Thanks, Dad. Tell me proud. So I found this YouTube channel because I was doing a bit of Googling for social sciences, and I stumbled upon this thing about Aristotle and his fear of the oligarchy as opposed to tyrants. And I was like, this sounds interesting. So I clicked on it. And do you know what I'm talking about?
I only at a very superficial level.
Okay. So Aristotle, obviously, profound philosopher, talked a lot about what happens with gradual erosion in governments and how they decay. And he famously said that he fears oligarchies more than tyrants because tyrants are verbose. They come out telling you what they want. They come out saying, you will adhere to what I say or we'll kill you. Whereas oligarchies, they're like mold. You can't see them. They're way more insidious. And so all of that concentrated wealth in the oligarchy then means we are following the rules of people we don't know. And, people talk about BlackRock. They talk about the World Economic Forum. But that's essentially what's happening here. And with the oligarchies, because it's so subtle, people fall into line for this unknown entity. And what happens is this gradual erosion from institutions, from the legal sector. Everything is rotting from the inside, but it's by the time we start to realize, like now, it's too late. And so inevitably government systems collapse. And
it's
I read
not too late, but it is late, but it's not too late.
Yeah. I was listening to that and I was like, holy shit. Like, it's just, we are on a recursive loop of just repeating the same behavior. Like, when was Aristotle around?
Oh, it's thousands of years. But you go right back to whether it's Marcus Aurelius or any of these sort of the Greek philosophers, the Roman philosophers, and then through, you read some of the early English history and the fight to get the Magna Carta signed and then to get it re-signed because the king basically disregarded it when it was signed the first time. People lost their lives over this stuff. And then we really take it for granted today. We view this as somehow inherent, innate to our culture, and it's not. It was given to us by our ancestors, and we're very, very blessed to have had that. But there's nothing special about us that guarantees that we get to keep it. And Troy,
crazy? Oh, sorry,
well, just a sec, Troy. That's really, really weird. What a coincidence! Because my earpiece was telling me the same thing at the same time. Wow. I mean, spooky, right?
I don't get an earpiece because I'm on too many government watch lists.
You're a security risk. See, I'm the controlled opposition. I'm here to control you.
I get accused of that, but no one seems to be paying me for it. So it kind of sucks. I just Googled then, when was Aristotle alive? And I knew it was a long time ago, but I didn't realize it was before Christ.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thousands. That's why I said thousands, plural. It was, I don't know exactly, but it was before Christ.
384 BC, the classical Greek period. Jesus. So we've had the answers, guys, for a long time.
That was a good year, 384 BC. That was, I remember it well.
Yeah. Guys, if you want us to touch on any subjects, chuck in a super chat and we'll get to it. Otherwise, Topher and I are just going to riff off about castle law. But should we talk about it? Should we?
I think we need to. So number one, props to you. You're getting down and dirty now, and I think it's fantastic. You're getting involved in the fight at a deeper level than as a commentator. You've done a lot already, but I love the fact that you're doing more. And the courage that takes. You've been through a lot. You've copped it from the media before, and it is a mark of your character and courage that you're willing to put your hand up and go, okay, I'll put my name on this, and I'll sort of pop my head back up again and potentially become a target. I don't think you will. I don't think you will, but you're taking that risk, and I think massive credit to you. But I'm loving the amount of momentum that there is now behind this. This is something that is happening Australia-wide, 60,000 signatures in the Queensland petition, as someone's pointed out. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to get a lot of traction with the Queensland legislature up there. I think actually we've got a better chance here in Victoria. And I know in WA, on Thursday, I believe, they've got a protest on the steps of Parliament House in West Australia to do with shooters' rights, land access, the Indigenous Land Rights Act that they rammed through a little while ago, and then they had to repeal in a hurry because it was just an absolute dog's breakfast, completely unworkable. And people all over Australia are getting sick of this stuff and are beginning to arc up and to step up. One of the mistakes that people make in these moments is that they want to see quick results. So they'll show up to a couple of protests and they'll sign a petition, and then 6 months later they're like, well, is it fixed? Oh, no, it's not fixed. Oh, well, there's nothing you can do. And they cop out of the fight at that point. And if you go back in history, we were just talking about this, if you go back in history and have a look at the decades of effort that went into things like abolishing slavery in the United Kingdom, the first empire on earth to abolish slavery. Every empire before them had slavery. Many empires today, or many countries today, still have slavery. Arguably, the West still does as well, but at least it's not legal. It's not legally sanctioned. That was a decades-long effort. And William Wilberforce only just lived long enough to actually see it all the way through and to see it really come into effect. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The battle for freedom was raging long before we were born, and it will continue long after we're dead. The only thing that we get to do is decide what we do with our time while it's our turn. And if you're breathing, it's your turn. So I don't care if it takes 6 months or 6 years, or if this is a battle that you're going to fight all the way until you breathe your last breath and you hand the baton on to the next generation. I believe we have a moral obligation, Christian or not, it's not about that. We have a moral obligation to honor our ancestors and the people that fought for that for us, to fight for it in our generation, and to do everything we can to pass it on.
Well, what's that quote about freedom isn't inherited, it's fought for?
It's not passed down in the blood. Freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. It is not passed down in the blood. It has to be fought for in each generation. I don't remember the exact quote, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah. And I think that's what, actually, we'll talk about this on Wednesday because I need to watch a bit more of it. But this channel I found was just fascinating. As you guys know, I've been doing a lot of research, and a lot of it is sociology and psychology and learning about groupthink. And I can only just paraphrase what I learned very quickly. They were talking about the science of stupidity, and how stupidity isn't necessarily a lack of IQ. Stupidity is what happens when there are systems that funnel smart people into groupthink, and they no longer have to critically think. And obviously we saw a lot of that during COVID. But what I found really fascinating is that this psychology that's been unfolding, and obviously I'm looking at this from the woke side of things, right? Like I'm looking about how this applies to culture. But now when I look at this and the way people are politically apathetic. So for example, I always talk about the comment threads. We're discussing the social media ban, or the age limits. And when you go read the comment threads, there's two trains of thought. That's it. There is we need to do it for the kids, and that you're taking away my freedom. Now, both are very superficial arguments. The people are like, we've got to do it for the kids. You don't understand. I kid you not. I wrote a comment on something that said, how Bolshevik of you. That was all I said. And this person sent me this bloody paragraph calling me a pedophile because I didn't want under 16s to not have access to have access to YouTube. And she's like, if you don't think they should have that, if you think they should have access, you're essentially a pedophile.
You must be one of them. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, and I went onto this person's page, and I wouldn't say they're dumb from the sense of they're mentally low IQ.
Yeah.
This person's just incredibly stupid because she's parroting firstly talking points, and she's fallen for the propaganda of we're doing it for the children,
So Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, he was a German tank general. He was instrumental in the Germans making the progress they did in North Africa during World War II. Really interesting guy. Because he actually actively defied Hitler's orders to round up Jews and so forth. He was not on board the Nazi project. He was a loyal German commander of German forces, but he was not on board the Nazi extermination of the Jews and any of that. And he's a fascinating guy for a lot of different reasons. He had a very interesting philosophy. He said everyone falls into one of two categories on two key axes. You're either smart or you're stupid, and you're either hardworking or you're lazy. He said the people who are lazy and stupid make perfect grunts. You put them down the bottom of your armed forces, and they're the ones that do all the grunt work. They have to be yelled at and kicked to get them moving, and they're too stupid to know any better. So they're your cannon fodder. They're your grunts. The people who are smart and industrious, the people who are smart and hardworking, they're your middle management. All right.
Yeah.
They're your lower level officers and your high level non-commissioned officers that do a lot of the organizing on the ground. The people who are smart and lazy, they're your top brass, because they find the path of least resistance. They try and be clever about how they use their energy because they can't be bothered. They don't want to. And so you promote them up to the top. This was his theory. But the people who are stupid and hardworking, you just have to get rid of. You just have to find a way to get them out of your life, in his case, out of the armed forces. Stupid and hardworking was a toxic person in his view. There was a place for the other three, but not for that. And unfortunately, a lot of our bureaucracies, as much as we like to laugh at them and call them lazy, they would push back and say, no, I'm working flat out from the moment I get into the office. I'm in meetings and I'm filling out these forms and I'm doing this thing. They're incredibly industrious. They are hardworking and stupid. And unfortunately, that's why they're able to do so much damage.
Yeah. I just want to read this comment from Ricky Hammer. I always said during the big sneeze that at least Stalin and Hitler had the decency to admit they were tyrants. And yeah, sometimes there's a quote about this, maybe you know it, but it's essentially like, better the devil that appears in the light than the devil that appears in the dark. I can't remember what the quote is, but.
Well, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Well, something like that. But essentially, like, I'd probably paraphrase like 6 quotes in one, but essentially saying like, that's that whole Aristotle thing about don't fear the people who tell you what they are, fear the ones that tell you what they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when a politician says, trust me, straight away they're about to, they're doing something dodgy,
There was a comment that I'm trying to find, like you guys are busy in the chat, so awesome, but I also can't find this comment, but it was about the protest that's been organized for August 31st. You know about this?
Yeah, I only know of it. No one's actually approached me directly. I don't know anyone involved. I'm not planning on being there myself. I've got enough going on.
Here we go.
But yeah, there are some concerns about it. And there was another comment actually asking about this, and just someone saying that, look, they kind of, their spider senses were tingling. I'm paraphrasing what they said as I'm scrolling and looking for it. That
I have a couple of thoughts. If you're not willing to put your face to it, like this has been organized by an unknown entity, and that worries me for 2 things. It sounds like a trap. Not a trap as in like, like something nefarious is going to happen. More so like this is obviously going to be branded as some kind of racially motivated Nazi protest. And that's something you need to think about. Whenever we did the protest during lockdown, like we said it from our mouths. You knew it was us. We were talking about it. You could see our faces. With this protest, all I have seen is people randomly sharing like a little snippet. No one's putting their face to it, and that just makes me feel very uneasy.
Yeah, I'm not loving it. I wish someone would just come out and actually approach me about it and say, hey, this is who we are, and will you support this? And then I can actually do some due diligence. In the absence of someone doing that, and maybe that's why they haven't reached out to me, is because they know I'll do my due diligence and I won't like what I see. I don't know. But normally when these things are happening, the organizers are reaching out to me saying, hey, are you aware of this? We exist. Here's who we are. Here's what we're about. And I can do some background on them. In this case, no. So I don't plan to be there, and you won't find me promoting it. I'm not saying don't go, but buyer beware. I won't be promoting it. I
could get around it if this is the point of the protest. To forcibly give purple pingers a bath. You guys
listen. I don't condone the use of force, but I might be willing to make an exception for that one.
Yeah, maybe just like get a bit of soap on him too. But yeah, so the protest, like I've been saying this for a while. I've been wanting to organize a protest, but the issue with this is, and it's always the way, and it's got something to do with, not that I'd call myself a conservative, but at the right side of politics, we don't tend to like grab the pitchfork, whereas the left do. Like, I mean, credit to them, every weekend they're out there bloody banging their drum for Palestine. But like trying to, like, even this petition, even though people are outraged about what's going on, getting people to sign that bloody petition so that we can get it like tabled in Parliament is going to be like pulling teeth. We'll get the first 1,000. But the last 9,000, and this is what's so frustrating. So when it comes to a protest, I think it's going to be very difficult to get enough people who feel the way that we currently do. And that's, there's 921 of you on this chat. Like, I don't think you're all going to rock up to this protest. That's my frustration with it.
When you say this protest, you're talking about yours on the Wednesday morning at Parliament House?
No. You guys can come to that one. I mean the 31st.
Oh, the 31st. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So contrast this. So for example, gosh, why have I lost his name?
Thanks, Patrick. Hi, bye.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it. The fighter who rose to prominence during COVID because he kept his gym open. Gosh, why have I lost his name? I've interviewed him multiple times.
There's a few of those people.
He's got cauliflower ears. He was the one who was the face of the counter protest after we saw the Islamic sort of march stop out the front of St. Patrick's Cathedral and surround that and do their various gestures and so forth. He organised a protest in response. Nick Patterson. But like you said, he put his face to it. He put his name to it. He said very clearly, this is why we're doing it. This is what we're about. This is what we're saying. And then if you watch the videos, and Avi Yemeni and Rukshan and others were there, they were actively going and finding anyone that were known neo-Nazis or anyone that was obviously trying to conceal their identity and weeding them out of the crowd. And if they started to cause trouble, they were actively drawing the police's attention to weed them out. And that's what you need. You need a protest that is led by someone who's willing to be public, to publicly stand up on what they believe, where there's going to be public accountability. If that had all gone south, and if Nick had not, done any sort of, made any real effort to control that, then it would have been on him. And he knew that, so he stepped up. And Nick's a fantastic guy, and he's got the peacemakers, and he's got a wonderful reputation. And I thought he handled that whole day really, really well. We have no such guarantees that anything like that's going to happen on the 31st. And in fact, for all we know, it might be being organised by those very people. So,
Oh, God, those fucking little shits. Like, I can't even give them any airtime. Like, you know exactly who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Joel Davis and all his like little cowardly clan who rock up at 1 a.m. Oh, look at you guys marching in your black. Oh, you're so cool.
So brave. So brave.
It's fucking embarrassing. Honestly, like everyone's like, oh, neo-Nazis. I'm like, they're little fucking boys wearing balaclavas.
Oh, look, they're not necessarily little boys. Unfortunately, some of them should be men by now, but they haven't developed intellectually. But also, what percentage of them do you think are like police plants? Because there would be a significant minority, probably not a majority of them, but a significant minority would be installed in there by Victoria Police to try and get intel and find out what's going on and blah, blah, blah. How many of them are there really that actually agree? I mean, if it's 100 in a state, come on, are we really giving them all of that airtime?
Lady Patience, no, you're not blacklisted. Did you say something that I can't see? We have a lot of comments. I'm sorry.
There's literally, I don't know how many, but there would have to be over 1,000 comments have come through already. I
feel terrible because I'm trying to listen to you and I'm trying to talk and then I'm trying to. It's very hard.
Just ignore me, Carly. Everyone else does. Just tune out. Let me rant, and then when I stop talking, that's your cue to jump in with something intelligent.
And I'll be like, oh, what the fuck was he talking about? But yeah, so this is the issue with protesting as what we're doing. That's why, I don't share those change.org things either. And that's why I sort of let's do this petition. I think we were going to do it a while ago, but the problem is there just wasn't enough, sentiment behind it, and I've said this plenty of times. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Lady Patience, you've sent a super chat. All right, I'm looking. I'm looking as I'm talking. Tofik, there we go. There we go. Regarding the toads, have you read Toad Rage Glitzman?
By Glitzman. I'll be honest, I've never heard of it. There you go. Is that, Lady Patience, is that to do with the cane toads in Australia, or is that something different? I'm assuming that's in reference to someone else made a comment about my cane toad video. So was that from way back then? If that was, then I'm sorry, Lady Patience, that we missed it. That was from a while ago. I'll have to look that up.
What was I talking about? Totally lost my train of thought.
Well, you were talking about petitions and how there was the thought of doing it earlier, look at me, I was listening to you, but there wasn't the outrage, I think is where you were going. There wasn't the public anger yet.
Yeah, and that was the problem. So when when we had our home invasion, what was it, November? And what a housewarming present, can I just say? We'd only been in this house 2 weeks. Welcome to the neighborhood. Your car just got stolen. When it happened, obviously, I put up a video because that's kind of what I do. I was like, well, we need to talk about this. And looking back, I should have waited a week because I was pretty emotional, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And
understandable.
I kind of wish I'd waited just a week so that I could look into this a little bit more, because most people are like, oh, well, you have a nice car, so too bad, so sad. That was kind of the attitude.
Yeah.
It just so happened that it was a Porsche that got stolen. Guys, it's not a fucking 911. It's, you know,
Yeah, it's not a 911 turbo. No.
Yeah. But just how callous people were in the comments. And then, of course, because I was that COVID chick, people like, oh, you deserved it.
Yeah.
Now that it's happening to a point where, I mean, admittedly, we were relatively okay. Like, nothing happened to us personally. They came in, stole my handbag, stole the car, and that was that.
Yeah.
But now, months later, it's home invasions, because, again, this is a progressive thing, right? It starts out sort of in pockets, and then it gets shared on social media, so it becomes a social contagion, and then they get more confident. And now they're rocking up, having machetes, and they're going into these homes knowing that they will never be held accountable. There's nothing you can't do anything. And so now we're seeing, sorry.
This is the crime of the government not failing to uphold law. I mean, I don't ask the government to do much. I want the government to stay out of my way as much as possible. But if you're going to say that we're going to do law and order, we'll have the police, we'll have the courts, leave it to us, you'd better jolly well do your job. And these kids would not have escalated into, pack armed home invasions if they'd actually been held properly accountable when they did their first bag snatching or their first car theft or any of these sorts of things, if they'd actually been properly held accountable. So what's happened since is entirely a failure of the justice system and entirely a failure of the courts. And now to have them running around saying, oh, we're going to have the toughest bail laws. Well, we still haven't seen them. They're still releasing these people on bail, almost every single time. I believe in the case of the kid that chopped the guy's hand off over a phone, I believe he was remanded in custody. But the vast majority of them are not. And they're released back out there. So honestly, at some point, people are going to lose their patience. And I hope that they lose their patience in the form of getting the laws changed and getting the system to actually step up and do its job. But I'm not going to blame anyone for losing their patience in the form of taking matters into their own hands. I understand where that person would be coming from.
I'm going to play you guys a story. So I have the link in Instagram, so give me a second. So let me just play it again for you guys. Whoop, whoop.
An armed intruder has come off second best during a violent home invasion in Melbourne's west. The burglar was overpowered by a hero son who was stabbed several times as he tried to defend his elderly father.
Chasing down a burglar, a furious son defending his dad. At 8 o'clock last night, police say an armed intruder wielding a knife broke into Salvatore Andrula's Albion home, demanding his car keys, punching the 84-year-old in the face. Those wails are coming from the burglar, who was pinned to the ground by Salvatore's son Joey. He lives in the house behind his dad's. Police arrived within minutes, begging the 50-year-old to let the intruder go.
Hey, mate, let him go. Let him go. Oi, get back, you. I understand he's trying to you.
It's alleged the armed intruder stabbed Joey multiple times.
He'd just been defending his family, and he's lucky he lives next door to his parents. It just would have been like natural instinct.
The number of violent home invasions have spiked, prompting a motion which will be presented to State Parliament this week to review self-defence laws, potentially giving residents more rights to protect their homes.
An aggravated burglary where people are home is happening every single hour here in this state. We need to have that review.
The laws in this area are proportionate. In the case of emergency, the safest thing to do would be to call Victoria Police.
I can't play anymore. Call Victoria Police. Go fuck yourself, that stupid, useless wench. Sorry, I'm swearing a lot tonight, guys. I don't mean to.
So what's happening here, though, Carly, is when it happened to you 6 months ago, people were able to disassociate and still tell themselves, well, that wouldn't happen to me. And people are quite selfish a lot of the time. And so they say, well, if I'm okay, then I don't care. But I think what's happened in the 6 months since is people have had to grapple with the reality that actually that could happen to any home at any time, including theirs. A situation like that, honestly, I mean, listening to the cops shouting at that guy as though he's the one who's done the wrong thing. He's got multiple stab wounds. He's holding down the person that just tried to murder him with a deadly weapon. That absolutely boils my blood. The fact that he's ended up in hospital, the fact that the assailant lived, sorry, but some of these guys got to die. Like, some of these guys need to end up in a body bag. I've been public about that before. I'm not saying anything new. I'll say it again, and I'll say it over and over again. Some of these people need to go home in a body bag, and then the others that are watching on will start to go, well, even though the cops aren't going to hold me accountable, even though the magistrate's not going to hold me accountable, I could die if I go and do that. And that might start to shift the mentality a little bit. But this absolutely boils my blood. And what a coward and cowardly people we've become, that we are forced to the point that we have to beg the government to let us protect ourselves in our own homes. What a pathetic state of affairs.
Look, we're agreeing with Amanda. What is this? Unification.
Wow. Wow.
This is amazing. Guys.
Now, one of the other commenters made a great point about Amanda's name that I hadn't, obviously the Trollia is obvious. I hadn't quite made the Amanda connection, Amanda Trollia. Yeah.
So Amanda's
clever,
a
Amanda.
man.
I will tip my hat to you. I had not made that connection. Amanda, well played. I want to change up the subject a little bit though, because this is a great question here. Banana Mags in Pajamas says, what about a rural Brexit split from the cities? So you need to look up the Riverina State Project. I believe they have a Facebook page, and there's a website as well. There are multiple projects around Australia, North Queensland, parts of WA, and the Riverina where I am, that are all proposing exactly that. We've got to separate from the cities because the cities are toxic, and the voting public in the cities are absolutely toxic. So wholeheartedly there with you, but I suggest you look up the Riverina State Project and start to dip your toe into that world.
I've got another comment here. Patrick, everyone complains about them being constantly released. Okay, where do we put them? Local stations can only hold so many for so long, and we can't build prisons or train guards quick enough to keep up. So can someone, I've had quite a few people tell me this, but I've never actually, to be fair, gone in depth and got the concrete evidence. But apparently we do have remand centres that are empty. There's just no staff to fill them. Is that the case? I keep hearing multiple reports about this. And the reason that we're not throwing these kids in prison is a couple of things. One, the mandate from the government is to bail them if they're underage, and also that there's no staff to put them in remand.
Don't care. Find someone that's been in there for 10 years already and has a decent chance of rehabilitation, and bail them instead.
Yeah.
Right. Find other people, let them out. These young kids are getting away with very close to murder, and it's only a matter of time before it is murder. And if we don't, if you go,
sorry, I was going to say, I would argue, and this is going to be a weird one. Let me formulate this as it's coming out of my mouth. I would argue that murder. I mean, once you're murdered, you're kind of gone, right? What's worse than murder? Being maimed and having to live the rest of your life with that memory that some 14-year-old cut your fucking hand off with a machete over an iPhone. That's a life sentence. Murder,
well, sure.
In a weird way, like, you don't have to sit there and go, wow, my hand got cut off because the government doesn't give a fuck. Like, I'm not saying I want people to be murdered, by the way.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you. As a dad, I would rather my kids had to grow up with a dad that was missing a hand than without a dad.
Yes, I'm being hyperbolic, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Look, I get where you're coming from, but ultimately these kids shouldn't be getting anywhere near where they already are. This is purely for the fact that we did not hold them properly accountable when they were younger, when they committed their first serious offences. Kids are going to be kids to a certain degree. Someone, shoplifting lollies from the corner shop.
I'm not going to cop that. Kids are not being kids. I've been a fucking kid. No. You've been a kid. We didn't do this shit.
I'm making a distinction though. Someone shoplifting lollies from a corner store, that's one thing, right? That's when you go, okay, you need some guidance. You need to be pulled back on track a little bit. We're gonna try and guide you. Someone that's taking a weapon and breaking into someone's home has crossed an entirely different line, and we need to treat that entirely differently, and we're not.
Yeah, look, and this is the thing. I sent you an article today, and I was hoping to bring it up on Wednesday, but I'll just briefly touch on it now. And this was in the Wall Street Journal, and the article was "Goodbye, Gentle Parenting. Hello, fuck around, find out." And
Yep.
what was interesting, right? So the Wall Street Journal, obviously quite left-leaning, and this is all part of the research I do for you guys on a Wednesday. But again, the comment section. Most people like you, the comments were, oh, what, Asian parenting? Oh, we call this Balkan parenting. Well done, Western world. Try to keep up. And in there, I was thinking like I was going to get a whole lot of comments saying like, oh no, like the children. No, everyone was like, about fucking time. What are
100%.
you doing? Why aren't you
But
smacking the shit out of these kids?
The problem now is that a lot of the people working in law enforcement and a lot of the people, even now magistrates at the lower levels of courts, they're younger than you and me, Carly. And they were raised with this soft parenting approach, because I'm right at the bottom end of Gen X, right? And you're even a few years younger again. We were among the very last people to get raised like that. And once you go 5 years younger than you, Carly, these were kids that were raised in an entirely different world to the one that you were raised in. And they're now the ones making the decisions. They're the ones, they're the police officers that are the informants that are doing the prosecuting. They're the lower level magistrates who are bailing these imbeciles. These are people that were raised with a soft touch. And so as parents start to toughen up and recognize that the right thing to do for their kids actually involves discipline where it's warranted and where it's needed, and firm discipline where it's warranted, the magistrates and the prosecutors are not going to have a bar of it, because they're from the generation that was raised entirely the wrong way.
I get it. Hang on, I'm just finding this article for you. It's just interesting because, again, I think the sentiment has well and truly shifted. Obviously, the news is always slow to pick up what's going on, but that is why I focus on these comments. Okay, so that's the story in the Wall Street Journal. There you go. And I'm just going to read a handful of the comments.
Sure.
I'm going to ignore the woke ones because we already know what they're going to say. It took 2 generations damaged by gentle parenting to understand that great grandma who didn't go to college was right all along. Great business for psychologists, though. And then we've got people saying boomer parenting worked so great the first time, nobody needed therapy at all. So that's one of the, counter arguments. This is how Gen X was raised. Why is everything from our generation always being portrayed as brand new when it comes around again? Years ago, my 13-year-old son was about 3 years old and refused to get in the bathtub. We had about 25-minute fight about getting him in the bathtub. I finally just picked him up and threw him in there in his clothes, and the tears turned to laughter and disbelief. He still talks about it 9 years later. Clearly, it made an impression. Yeah, good on you. Not sure this is even debatable. Check out the office of high school and see all the mummies dropping off the belongings their kids forgot. Forgot once and you learnt. Just like we all do, natural consequences are a natural thing and people just want to shield their kids from them. Yeah. We can go into this further on Wednesday, but the interesting thing about gentle parenting is go have a look at the amount of kids who are now pathologizing just the basics of their normal behavior. Everything now is I'm spicy, neurospicy, I'm ADHD, I've got some kind of tism. There's a study, and I'm sort of jumping all over the place here, but there was a study around Tourette's and how many people, because of TikTok, have started identifying as having Tourette's and have adopted these tics that they now have tics, as in they've tried to emulate what Tourette's looks like. And now they've gotten to this weird pathological behavior where they can't stop it. So it's not actually Tourette's, it's this other thing. Parents need to be more responsible for their kids. I think that's at the end of it. I can't say smack your kids because that'll end you in jail, but what's the consequence? We now have 14-year-olds cutting hands off with machetes. Is there no?
And unfortunately, we live in a society that is so keen to protect kids from consequences, even the natural ones that are just a natural, genuine consequence of their own actions. I'll give you an example. So my son and I do a lot of mountain bike riding, and we were out on the weekend. We were out on Sunday. I'm just scrolling back trying to find a super chat from Daniel. Daniel, I saw your comment. I'm pretty sure we did put it up. I think you might have missed it. I'm just trying to find it again. But we were out mountain bike riding, and we've got some pretty steep hills behind us. And I was following him down one of those hills, and he's 9 years old, and he's only been riding really seriously for about 2 months. And he's ripping his way down there, doing jumps, both wheels well off the ground and landing. And I'm coming down behind him thinking, this isn't going to end well, right? His confidence far exceeds his skill level. It just hasn't gone wrong yet. So he thinks he's good. And in my mind, as a parent who very much cares about my kid and his future, my thought in that moment was, he needs to have a crash, right? He needs to experience the natural consequences of overconfidence. Well, it only took about 8 minutes. And he had a pretty big crash. He went end over end. He's got scratches all down his back. I was there for him. I scooped him up and checked him, made sure he hadn't broken his collarbone, did all the right things, and got him home and looked after him. But that's a really important life lesson, right? You've got to experience consequences. And this is, I remember people complaining about the old playgrounds with the big wooden beams and high sort of stuff and stuff you could fall off being taken out and replaced with these plastic super safe ones with a bed of tan bark underneath that was 1.5 feet thick so that no one could hurt themselves. And I remember people saying kids aren't going to learn how to take risks. And as a kid, I was like, that's silly. Like, that's what a silly perspective. But I get it now. We need to experience the boundaries, the physical natural boundaries. We need to experience the physical natural consequences. And where we're doing something that doesn't have physical natural consequences, there are times when artificial consequences need to be brought in. And that's what discipline is for. And people say, oh, but discipline is abuse. No. Abuse is when you are taking something out on your child because of the past, because of what they did in that moment. And you're angry, you're frustrated, whatever. Discipline is about looking at the child's future and saying, I need to correct this now for your sake. I'm going to give you some consequences now that aren't going to be terrible for you so that this behavior ends, because if I allow you to keep going, you will end up enduring consequences far worse.
Can I tell you a story? It's kind of related, but when you sort of look back in your life and you go, oh, they're the defining moments. That's where my character was cemented, Sure. I was always, I was that kid that had no fear, strap the rollerblades to my feet and just go. And I think there's an element there of, if the parent interrupts that experience, then kids forget their parameters of fear. And then you become very risk adverse. And I think that really stunts your character growth. And what I mean by that is, obviously you don't want kids to go flying off into a oncoming car, but we weren't silly. We were going down a hill at crazy amount of speed, knowing full well that a car could come up the hill, but we also would be able to see the car. We weren't stupid and going into blind corners. But fast forward, sorry, go. Were you going to cut me off again?
I was agreeing with you.
Yeah. And we did all sorts of things. I've told some of these stories on the podcast before, but fast forward to, I got my very first job when I was 14 and 9 months, and I really wanted to go to ski camp. And I believe it was $500 in 2000 maybe. So that was quite a lot of money back then. Yeah. And my parents said to me, we're not paying for that. If you want to go ski camp, you have to save for it. And I was like, well, okay. So I think I earned around $60 to $100 a week at Macca's. So I was putting my money aside, and then, I put the deposit down for ski camp, and then I eventually paid for it. So it was all my money. Now, I was in year 10. So what are you in year 10? 15? 14? Somewhere there?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So we went up to Mount Hotham, which, by the way, is my favorite mountain. And for those who know me, I love my snow. And I love just going fast. Just let me go down that hill. And that's just my thing. And so I did. And I had only skied one time before. So the year prior, I'd been skiing. And, of course, I was an expert. So 15 years old, just absolutely hammering down Hotham. And unbeknownst to me, I get clipped by a novice snowboarder. And we have this spectacular crash, and we just tumble down the hill. Now, I remember distinctly hearing something go snap. But I was like, ooh. We finally come to a stop. And, all the teachers, everyone stops. Everyone's like, oh, my God, what has just happened? And I, knowing full well that I just paid $500 to be on the ski camp, I was not going out without a fight. And I get up and I just act like nothing happened. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm fine. And my teacher's like, I don't think you're fine, Carly. And I'm like, and I'm holding my hand like this. And she's like, what's wrong with your hand? And I'm like, nothing. Oh, I'm a bit sore. Knowing full well that there was something seriously wrong with my hand. Anyway, I act like nothing happened, get off, dust myself off, and continue on. Anyway, that night, I'm in agony. My hand is like vibrating with pain. And the teacher looks at me and she's like, I think we should go to hospital, don't you? And I was like, no, because I know you're going to send me home. Anyway, go to the hospital, have a scan. And it's like really old school equipment. So the x-ray is not great. It's a bit grainy. And they're like, oh, looks like a fracture, but I'm not quite sure. What do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm staying. I'm here for another 2 days. I ain't going no place.
Do not put that in plaster. Yeah.
I was like, I'm fine. So I just went to the ski shop and got some, those like the, what do you call it? The wrist guards, snapped that on and off I went. I was in a lot of pain, but I was 15. I didn't care. Anyway, come home, back to Sunbury, go back. And then I show by this stage, my wrist's like the size of a bloody, doubled in size. My parents look at it and they're like, what have you done this time? I'm like, I think it's a bit ouchy. They take me to the hospital. I'd snapped my fucking radius. And my parents are like, you skied for 3 days with a broken hand. I'm like, yeah. Like, I wouldn't have done that. If my parents had have interfered all that time stopping me from doing stuff. I'm not saying that to be like, oh, look at me, I'm so brave. What I'm saying is, like, look at the limit. I had invested all that money. I was not, I knew the value of the money. I was not willing to put myself in a position where I was going to lose out. Like, that lesson reminds me of just how strong and courageous I can be if I need to. I was 15, I think those lessons are so important because now at, almost 40, I look back and go, yeah, they were the defining parts of my life where I saw my character shape. And I don't want to rob kids of that. And the more we wrap them in cotton wool, the more we're like, trampolines, can I tell you, it is a rite of passage to fall between those springs, to be electrocuted by them, and to stand on that black mat on a 40-degree day and burn your butt. But can I say, it's a whole other level when your parents think that trampoline's really friggin' ugly. So they plant a rose garden around said trampoline, falling off into the rose gardens. That is the final level of trampolining, guys.
Can I say, no, the final level of trampolining is being a boy and falling on the springs, which then stretch, and then as it comes back up, they pinch. That's the final boss of trampolines. That's another level. Moving right on from that, Daniel, yes, I can confirm we did bring that up when we were talking about the bins. So I just wanted to go back and make sure I found that. So we talked about the fact that the layers of bureaucrats, etc., involved are where the cost gets so-called justified, but the cost, honestly, it can't be justified. But yes, having children experience risk and experience natural consequences in a way that doesn't break them is an essential part of childhood. And if you get a situation, I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say you've got a kid who's grown enough hand strength to be able to undo their belt buckle in the car, right? And you're on a road trip. Now, you know that in the event of a crash, them not wearing their seatbelt is going to be an incredibly serious and incredibly dangerous thing. But their brain can't comprehend that. They want to be able to move around in the back of the car. They're bored. Whatever it may be on this road trip. What do you then do? The consequences, if it goes wrong, are potentially fatal for that child, but they're never going to understand it. And that's where we need to have the ability to bring in some artificial consequences, something that we engineer and do on purpose to then change their behavior because they're not yet going to understand what the potential consequences are. So there are many, many contexts. People say, kids, you got to just let them figure it out. Well, sorry, there are situations that arise in life when you've got kids where you have to be the parent and get them to do as they're told for their own sake in ways that they don't yet understand.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the super chats. I think we've missed a couple. So I'm just going to... We have
definitely missed a couple. I was just scrolling through to try and find them myself.
Do you know you can go to Start? If you go to the comments, you can go up to Start and it shows you them. The old playgrounds are back and it's awesome. Are you telling me flying foxes are back? Do you know how much fun I used to have trying to learn like somersaults and stuff on the monkey bars? I loved all that.
Good times. Good times.
Where are we? Patrick, a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. A fool learns from his own. Most people have already been there and done that. What did they learn?
Yeah. Yeah.
What parts of Melbourne do these kids come from? Is that referring to the youth criminals? because I actually got into an argument with someone over this the other day. A lot of people saying that, you know, it's all the African gang and all, and yes, that is an element of it for sure.
It's a
But
significant part of
actually,
it, yeah.
yeah, and that's probably where it started. But what people don't realize, this is such a social contagion now. It's crossed over to a lot of private school kids. So
Yeah.
because the problem wasn't stamped out years and years ago when they started talking about the apex Sudanese crime gang,
Yeah.
now it's like a lot of kids. And this is what a lot of people fail to understand about social media. Ban kids all you want. They're just going to find different ways to hang out. And what they're doing is they're flexing. Gangster rap, gangster culture has been held up as like cool for a long time. And I mean, every generation blames the music, but when you've got people glorifying all this gangster nonsense and, you know, they're holding their bloody $5 and $10 bills and their Nike sneakers being all like, you know, they want to be like their friends. And I can grab a whole bunch of bloody accounts and show you these kids. I screenshot them all the time. They're standing there. They look like babies. And they're wearing a bathing ape. They're wearing, like, what did you say? Ghetto rich clothing, which is exactly what it is.
Hood rich, yeah.
Yeah, so those brands they're wearing, they're actually Japanese brands. One's called Bape, and it's a designer brand. It's a designer streetwear brand. And I'm sure you can get knockoffs of it. But those hoodies retail for about $600.
Oh, wow.
And these kids are like flexing in front of a dirty mirror, holding like $60 cash in their hand with a machete, doing all these like bloody
the
symbols,
gang sign stuff. Yeah.
You know,
Careful, someone's going to call you a Freemason soon. Yeah.
Is that no Freemasons? That one, isn't it?
I don't know. So someone screenshot it. Quick. We've got proof now. We've got proof. Yeah. And we're going back a little bit. We have missed a few super chats. Sorry about that, guys. Cruel intentions. This is what happens when the government makes it illegal for the population to defend itself, both against criminals and against the government itself. That is a very good and important final sentence there. But what they would say, and this has been really interesting, watching Jacinta Allen try and nuance this, she would say that you're allowed to defend yourself with reasonable force, and that's the wording of the legislation. She's not technically wrong. But the way that's been interpreted, well, the way it's been interpreted in case law is that you've got to wait till you've been stabbed and then you can start to use serious force. You have to wait until after you've been put at a terrible disadvantage before you then hopefully have something within reach that can help to level the playing field. If you premeditate, if you put something in your house for the purpose of self-defense, well, that's a whole different ballgame. So the definition of reasonable force, is being completely misinterpreted by the courts. And so that's where we need the legislation to change, the wording in the legislation to change, to get the judges to no longer use those precedents, because that no longer applies once the legislation changes. Reword the legislation, therefore the judges have to actually view it differently and they're no longer bound by case law.
You would have seen the case a little while ago. It was a woman, I believe she was British, but, you know, Australian resident. She was raped. And she begged the judge to not let her rapist out because they were underage. And because the rapist is underage, we're not allowed to know the name and we're not allowed to know her name. But the kid was bailed and she's now left the country. I'll bring the story up on Wednesday. And essentially what the judge said is he is the rapist is the perfect candidate for rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So victim be damned. A woman was raped, but that's okay because the kid's more important. Like, when are we going to see these magistrates like have a piece of their own medicine? All right, magistrate, what's your address? Where do you live? Let's send some kids your way.
Before we get into doxing and get ourselves into trouble, it used to be that young men were considered adults at 13 years of age. That was when a majority of cultures, I'm going back, 1,000 years, a majority of cultures viewed 13 years of age as an entry into manhood. There was usually some sort of an initiation. Some of them were awful, arduous things. Some of them were actually very beautiful things, but there was a ceremonial progression into manhood. And from that point on, young men, 13-year-olds, were expected to behave themselves as men. They were no longer a child. You no longer do childish things. You're a man now. You need to learn how to be a man. You need to learn skills. You need to be useful. You need to protect others rather than harming them, etc. And we've taken all of that expectation off. Now we call them teenagers, and we allow them to remain children until they're into their 20s. Go to a university sometime and have a look at how many 25-year-old children are running around, and for that matter, the lecturers, 35 and 50-year-old children there are inside those walls. What we've done is we've essentially said you can remain a child for as long as you really feel like, and you don't have to grow up. And that's become an incredibly toxic element of this as well.
Well, I think you see that a lot playing out in culture with, the rise of Labubus and stuff, and not to belittle the conversation, but there is this real culture shift. I'm doing some research on this. I'm doing a video about it, hopefully this week, talking about how this current sentiment and the shift in culture has enabled people to stay to become Peter Pan, essentially.
Yep.
And because we've told them that the climate's going to collapse, that they'll never be able to afford a home, that the system's stacked against them, that they're oppressed, what's happened is a lot of these children have manifested into perpetual children, even in their adult life. And therefore, they go and spend their money as if they're a child. Like, this is a consumer issue. So when people are looking at like the Labubus and seeing how the hell we got people lining up at all hours of the morning to try and get these Labubus, this is why. This is a culture problem. Like, it's funny when I make these videos, I always get people going, "Oh, who cares? This is all stupid." I'm like, you're missing the context here. Is this is a bigger problem than you realize. You're looking at the Labubu story and going, "Oh, that's stupid," and dismissing it. That is actually a precedent for where the culture's flowing to.
Yeah, it's a symptom of a bigger problem, but it's more than just what people do with their money. If you tell people you have no future, one of the defining characteristics of adulthood is the ability to defer pleasure, to be able to work towards something, save towards something, put in the effort now, and endure some uncomfortable, some pain, some long hours, whatever it may be in your case, in order to achieve an objective that you recognize as being worthwhile in the future. That's what you talked about with saving for that ski trip. And what we're doing when we tell people you have no future is we're taking away that psychological element of preferring the future. And that is adulthood, the ability to actually go, no, I'm going to defer my pleasure and I'm going to invest into that future. Well, if I have no future anyway, I might as well just live for the now, which is permanent, childhood.
Topher, you got a question here. Massive super chat from Kyle. Thank you so much, Kyle. For Topher, when you say abolish all welfare, do you include veterans who are now unable to work because of their time in service? There are definitely people out there taking the piss, especially many on NDIS, but veterans, where do you stand on them? Good question.
So my position, it's a great question. Thank you, Kyle. And I don't know if that's your personal circumstance, but I do know people in that circumstance. And if that's yours, then that's a regrettable thing. And thank you for your service. My position is very, very simple. The government is the worst possible entity to put the lives and fortunes and futures of disabled people, poor people, people who have been unlucky in life or in circumstances. The government is the worst possible entity. And if you need proof of that, look at Centrelink. I would not condemn my enemy to have to endure dealing with Centrelink. Charity is by far the best way to look after people. And so when I say abolish welfare, I don't mean leave everyone in the lurch. I don't mean leave everyone with nothing. If you can't fend for yourself, then you get nothing. No. Charity is an incredibly important thing. And the reason why charity has shrunk, people say, oh, well, charity wouldn't be able to cover all of that. Well, it can't anymore because we've allowed government to step in and displace private charity through welfare. So what we would need to see is a gradual reduction in welfare, allowing the charity sector to actually step up and to take its place. What I expect from every adult is for every adult to do what you can, right? And for some people, that's not going to be enough to cover their cost of living. There are people who genuinely can't do anything. They need to be looked after all of the time. And I do not want to see those people starve or go hungry or go homeless or any of that. But I do not for a moment believe that the government is the best entity for looking after people in that situation. And especially if we fast forward from where we are now, if you think it's hard being a disabled veteran in a country that still has money, wait till you see how hard it is when the country's run out of money. And by making all of these people dependent on the government, unfortunately, we've set these people up. These are the people who will get hurt or are being hurt the most by things like our medical system running out of money, things like our police and the court system being completely dysfunctional. The poor are always the ones who are hurt the most. And I wouldn't want to put them, because I care about people like that, I don't want them to be at the mercy of the government.
I think like a fairly, I've brought this example up before, but a pretty good picture of that is look what happens around the bushfires. By the time the government's got themselves into gear, The local
Yeah.
communities have already worked together to raise money to get water there, to get food there, to get shelter there. You know, I always defend people. I think most people are inherently good. And I
Yeah.
think it's very hard. Obviously, there's exceptions, but I think it's very hard to walk past someone who's truly suffering and turn a blind eye. Not to say
Yeah.
that people don't do it, but I think that the government ruins everything it touches because all it does is overcomplicate it, overregulate it, and employ a whole bunch of people who just basically sit there and point fingers and never actually get anything done. When you put it down to people who are, are personally attached to the story, or, say, for example, you talk about a charity, Topher. Let's say there is a charity that's set up to service our veterans and it's run by veterans. And you see a lot of this in the US, like Black Rifle Co. is a really good example. It's a coffee company that does a considerable amount for veterans because their government does fuck all. We could see things like that.
On the Black Rifle Company specifically, but there's quite a few companies like that. They go out of their way to employ disabled veterans. And so they've set up their workplace so that people who have lost their legs to an IED or have very PTSD and psychological trauma, etc., they work with those people to say, okay, there's a lot that you can't do. What can you do? How do we work with you to give you the dignity of actually being able to contribute and being able to pay your own way and earn your own way in life? And again, if someone's genuinely past the point where that's possible for them at all, then they should still be looked after. But I believe as a society, we need to get better at making room for people that need some allowance in order for them to be a productive member of society. And this is where welfare gets really insidious. There's a thing called the welfare trap, where once someone's sort of in that system and they've found all the different, there's the rent assistance and there's this and there's that, and they get extras on their medical costs, etc. If they start to earn any money, those perks get stripped away from them very, very quickly. So what we've created is essentially a ceiling over the top of these people where we've said, we'll look after you, but we'll only look after you for as long as you stay helpless. The moment you start to actually step up and do what you can do, we're going to punish you so harshly. John Humphreys is an economist that I interview regularly. I actually interviewed him today. I've got another interview with him coming out in 2 days. He's done a lot of research on this, on the welfare trap. And for people who are deep into the welfare system, who then get a job and start working, the rate at which they lose their welfare perks translates into effectively being taxed at 80 cents on the dollar. So they go and get that minimum wage job to get back into the workplace and to start working, etc. For every dollar they earn, they're losing 80 cents in benefits, which means we're asking them to go out there and work for 1/5 of minimum wage. And most of them go, well, screw this for a joke. I'm going to stay on welfare. And I can understand that decision. From a human perspective, I can understand people just giving up and going, okay, I'm here now and I'm just going to stay here. I'm not going to try and work my way out. So the incentives, once the government gets involved, it destroys everything it touches. And if your welfare and your own survival is now dependent on the government, I'm sorry, but the government sooner or later, piece by piece, is going to destroy you too. It's just what the government does.
To change the topic quickly, you need to defend yourself because there's currently a chat where people are condemning you for smoking a cigar.
Talking about kids and smoking live, it doesn't make sense. Tell me you haven't read much about smoking without telling me you haven't read much about smoking. So on cigars, a great deal of research has been done into the effects of smoking. And yes, if you're smoking more than about 10 cigarettes a day, you can expect to have some pretty poor health outcomes as a result of that. Less than about 3 cigars a week, the change in your health outcomes is undetectable. And in fact, you have to get to about 2 or 3 cigars a day before your increased risk of cancer exceeds the margin of error in these studies. So below 2 or 3 cigars a day, they actually can't be sure that it has any change in health outcome. Now, it probably does. Every cigar, every cigarette probably does me some degree of damage, but it's literally undetectable in the studies. This is what the actual medical literature very clearly says. Throughout most of the world, they differentiate between cigarette smoking and cigar smoking, because unless you smoke a lot of cigars, at which point, you increase your risk of tongue cancer and throat cancer, all of that. But if you're having less than 2 or 3 a week, it is literally undetectable, and less than 2 or 3 a day, whatever they can detect is within the margin of error. For me personally, cigars are a wonderful mental health tool. I've had a very, very big day. It's been a very, very difficult day for lots of reasons. And I thought, you know what I would really enjoy while I have a chat with one of my favorite people in the world is a cigar. Nicotine has tremendous psychological and psychosomatic benefits. I find it very, very calming. I find it helps with clarity. It helps me immensely. If I'm feeling under the world, and my wife notices the change in me as well. If I'm feeling under the world, I'll get a cigar, I'll go out on the balcony, I'll sit outside, no phone, no computer, no nothing. And for an hour and a half, I'm outside just enjoying that cigar, and I'll come in like a new man. I'll come in whistling to myself with energy. I'll go and do the dishes and do this and that and get on with work, and whatever it was that was pressing me down no longer is. So for me personally, I would say that whatever cigars may cost me at the end of life was worth it for what I gained from them through in terms of the enjoyment of my life as I go along that journey. Now, that's not health advice. I'm not saying anyone else should do that. But what I will say is that I think you probably need to do a lot more research before you start throwing around comments like that. Now, there is a super chat that we've missed. I don't believe.
I wasn't sure where that was going to go, but I was like, oh, we went the research route. Okay, well done. Well done, you.
So, Wayne, I apologize. I believe we missed this. Carly, am I wrong? Did we miss this along the way?
No, we missed this. We're sorry, Wayne.
Yep. If you don't like what the government is doing or how the powers that be are forcing us down a road you don't like, make good old Clippy your profile picture. Clippy was there to help, not hinder. Swear away, Carls.
Clippy's the paperclip.
Clippy was
used
just
to be
annoying.
Everyone hated Clippy, but there's like a nostalgia renaissance around Clippy. Someone has him as a
he was there to help. That's true. Clippy was there to help. Wayne, I'll be honest. I'm not sure that I entirely understand the comment. Make good old Clippy your profile picture. Clippy was there to help, not hinder. I'm going to need some explanatory notes on that one, Wayne. I'm sorry.
Just on the whole nostalgia renaissance, I have a piece about this coming up soon, talking about how we are pushing back to analog because people are recognizing, particularly millennials, because again, millennials are almost in their 40s. They are now realizing that there is a profound impact of doing things a fairly rudimentary way has on your self-esteem, but also in the catharsis of just being busy with a simple task. So for example, everyone has a calendar on their phone, right? And most people have to have a Google Calendar or Apple Calendar, or whatever you use, Outlook, because that's where all of your meetings and all of your appointments come in, and they all send you reminders, so you add them all to your calendar.
Yeah.
The problem with that is you're never actually committing those to your memory. So you're like, oh shit, what's in my calendar? Whereas 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you had a diary and you manually wrote things down, and therefore you retain that memory a lot better. And the same goes with things like old school tasks that you do by hand. There was an element of muscle memory that went into that helped your brain turn off, switch off. And so whilst you're, beating a cake, not that we used hand beaters 30 years ago, but you know what I'm saying? Like you did things from scratch. And there was like a meditation that happened when you were doing that very simple task. And it's interesting because I was saying that to someone last year when I renovated the studio. I really love manual labor, and people are going to laugh. But what I mean is, like, if you want me to paint a wall for a whole day or sweep floors, or like my favorite is high pressure hosing, I will do that task for hours. Just leave me alone. And I'll have so much fun, so much to the point where I now get videos served up to me on social media of people pressure cleaning stuff. I'm like, I might start that as a business because I think that
I get sucked into them. I get sucked into those videos, not often, but I'll admit I've been sucked into them before. And you watch them going back and forward, and that next little strip, it goes from brown concrete to grey concrete, and you watch them working their way along. There is something really mesmerizing
when they're getting
about
that like calcified bloody mildew and stuff off the brickwork. I'm like, huh. And there's something about that we don't do anything anymore. We outsource everything. And I'm going to segue or tangent over to a story, and I'm going to massage the details because this person is a good friend of mine and I don't want to throw them under the bus. But let's read this clip first. Hang on. Shout out to my 2-stripe Adidas knockoffs from the Asian shop. The old snap pants.
Any old hoodie you wear is from my era. That's real Aussie hood gear. Absolutely. Gosh, the kids.
Kappa. And Face Off, ladies in the chat, do you remember Face Off pants?
Gosh. Did you ever get into Juicy as a brand?
As in Juicy Couture, the velvet or velour.
Yeah, velvet. Yeah. So my wife still has a Juicy tracksuit to this day. It hardly comes out anymore, but it's hiding there in her wardrobe, waiting to come back into fashion. That will come out.
They did. They did try to pull it back. Eddie, were you a basic bitch? No
Oh.
way. Did she have a Von Dutch hat?
No, I don't believe she ever went that far.
What about you? Did you ever have the Ed Hardy rhinestone encrusted t-shirts?
I was never a cool kid in any way, shape, or form. I was scared of so I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I was scared of the kids that had the two-stripe Adidas matching top and bottoms. Because in the 90s, of course, you had the parachute tracksuits and you had to have the matchy top and bottom. And the kids that had the two stripes, they had money, and you had to stay away from them. They were trouble.
Remember when you used to wear the parachute tracksuits and it's like, whoosh, 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 as you're
I
walking?
nearly set myself on fire because I fell asleep in front of the heater. We had one of those gas heaters that had the white kind of stone or whatever that is inside, and the gas goes up and heats up. I fell asleep lying in front of one of those. I woke up and I'd melted a patch out of the back of this thing. It hadn't caught on fire, but it had melted. And I loved that tracksuit so much. I was so upset. My mum actually sewed a big patch over the top, but I was embarrassed to wear it because that patch was just normal cotton, and I felt like a fraud.
Do you remember, ladies in the chat, there used to be a store called Westco. I don't know if they did boys' clothes. I can't remember. But Westco was like, so for all the Sunbury people in the chat, Sunbury Square used to have a shop called Westco, and it was kind of like, the theme of it was almost like a Western kind of shop. There's lots of wood from what I remember. And like, I'm talking like late 90s here. And you'd go in there and you'd see like all the cool 90s clothes, and you'd have to go and put them on lay-by and then go pick them up. And they used to have, all of that sort of hood clothing that I used to try and pretend I was a member of TLC. So funny. It's funny how you unlock those old memories. But
are you ready for a hit of nostalgia? Sorry, just a hit of nostalgia before you tell your story. Bang. Read that.
Wu-Tang and Kappa. But I feel like I can say this, and I'm saying this endearingly, but when I went to school, we had the Skips and the Wogs. And the Wogs wore the Wu-Tang and the Kappa, and the Skips wore the Nike and the Adidas.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my story is, and I was talking about where we're sort of shifting to culturally, and this story happened the other day, and I'm going to be loose on the details, like I said, because this is a friend of mine, and I don't want to embarrass them or shame them for what happened, but I don't think people realize how much we have been indoctrinated to behave a certain way by our government. So my girlfriend posted a story on Instagram witnessing a service provider doing something that would make workplace cringe, work cover cringe. This, I'm going to have to tell you the story so it makes sense. This person was on a roof, a 2-story roof, using a high-pressure hose to clean the roof tiles. And this person, I don't know if they had a business. I'm going to assume they had a business. Was on the roof, high-pressure hosing, no harness, just normal shoes, and like scampering across the roof and high-pressure hosing. Now, look, a couple of us will look at that and go, yeah, it's probably not smart, probably not the way to do it. But I would have just minded my own business and been like, you're going to make choices, mate. You fall off that roof, you'll learn. But she, as a concerned person, now this person aligns with you and I on everything. So this is not one of our woke Karens.
Yeah.
She was so outraged that she put in a complaint to Work Cover and dobbed him in, and did so because she's like, well, I don't want to watch someone fall to their death. And I kind of said to her, I was like, babe, you know how we fight against all the red tape and all the bureaucracy, and we get really mad when things cost a lot more than they should? That's why. You probably 100%. Just cost that man his business. He would have just copped a very large fine. Unbeknownst, he had no idea that you were there, and he was just going about his day, but you've inserted yourself in his life, probably financially crippled him. He'll probably lose a license if he has one. I don't know. I don't know who this person is.
Sure.
And now what's going to happen is Work Cover will go, oof, we need to install a new rule. You cannot operate solo anymore. You're going to need 3 people, scaffolding,
need a spotter,
a harness.
Someone with a trampoline down the bottom.
And now that $250 roof tiling pressure hose job, it's going to cost you $2,000. That's how the government works.
let's add another layer to this, because there'll be people saying, yeah, but if he falls off the roof, we all pay for all the surgeries and everything else, to, you know, all the hospital time and everything else. That is a fantastic reason to get rid of socialized healthcare, right? If you having to pay for other people's stupidity is the reason why you want to insert government into every single moment of every single person's life, I would say that that's a really good reason to abolish socialized healthcare. And people get outraged. But I want my socialized healthcare. Okay. You know, people say, well, I can't afford healthcare, right? I need social healthcare because I can't afford it. Look at America. Look at how much they pay. Well, America is a terribly broken system, not because it's private, but actually because it's more regulated than our system is. That's another story. But the reason why you can't afford your own healthcare is because you're busy paying government. You're paying for the cost of government. People think that the house is the most expensive thing they pay for in their life. Actually, it's government is the most expensive thing you pay for. And so because you have to pay for government, you can't afford to pay for your own costs. You can't afford to pay for your own private insurance that might look after you under those circumstances, or have money in the bank that might get you through something like falling off a 2-story roof because you're an idiot. So what we've got is this circular reasoning. I need government because I can't afford anything because I pay for government, which I need because I can't afford anything, but I can't afford it because I have to pay for the government. If we actually just get rid of that entire, all of this nonsense around the government has to look after us, protect us, help us if we lose our job, help us if we fall off a roof while we're pressure washing it. If we get rid of all of that, all of a sudden, the rest of us are going to find that actually we can afford to live and we can afford our own healthcare. And if we get the government out of healthcare, by the way, the costs would be much, much, much lower than what they are. The American system is not an example of what a private healthcare system looks like. That is a fascist healthcare system. The corporations in bed with the government. That's an entirely different story. But fundamentally, if we get rid of the cost of government, which is because we're paying for all these things, then we'll be able to pay for them ourselves.
Daniel, I'm going to come to your comment in a second, but I'm just living for this chat at the moment. I'm just scrolling through all of these comments of people reminding me about things from the 90s that I have not thought about in years. So
all right,
people were talking about Wax Jeans and Korn's self-titled album. Like, oh my God, that's like year eight just unlocked. I couldn't afford the Korn album because I didn't have a job yet. So I used to take my friends' CDs home and record them on cassette and then listen to them on a Walkman. Oh my God, I'm so old. SMP, Sex, Money, Power. That was a skateboarding brand. Yeah. People talking about the old Velcro wallets, the old Billabong wallets.
Yeah.
Stussy and Mambo. Oh God, Propaganda. Do you remember that shop? Propaganda was full of like cool streetwear clothes. So I love
Carly.
Sorry.
One more time, because clearly you didn't hear me the first time. I was never one of the cool kids. I never shopped in any of those places. I don't remember that they ever existed. I never set foot in one.
Oh, this makes me so happy. Green Apple said I'm half skip, half wog. Never knew which crowd I belonged to. Do you know what? Funny story. I always wanted to, like, my friends were a mix of everyone, but I always secretly wanted to be a wog because every time I went to my wog friends' houses, boy, did we get a feast. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like a smorgasbord.
The wogs had money. I grew up in Preston, and this is long before it was, you know, the inner city, yuppie suburb that it is today. It was a workers' cottage, poor person suburb when I grew up there. But just the next suburb out was Reservoir and Thomastown. And that's where a lot of the wogs moved. The second generation wogs moved. And, you know, they'd come over, their parents had come over with nothing, worked their asses off as brickies or concreters or these sorts of things, made some money. And out there, they had double-story houses and 5 cars in the driveway. And where I lived, which was like 5th, 6th, 7th generation Australians, was single-story houses and 1 car. And I always used to look at them, and because I'd ride my push bike around, and I'd see them, and I'd be like, what happened here? How come this is them? And where and they only got here a generation ago. How come? And of course it was because they worked their asses off. And also they looked after each other. This is the one thing that immigrant communities really got right when they came over in those generations. If you were a Greek, you shopped at the Greek grocery shop. When you needed work done, you rang up your Greek mate, and they spent their money with each other. And that's a really important roadmap for us as we look at the future and sort of the way the world is dividing in the ways that we've talked about before. Find your tribe and spend your money with your own tribe first. And only if you can't find somebody who's good within your tribe, spend your money with on the outside of it. It's entirely possible for us as a freedom community, or whatever you want to call us. It's entirely possible for us to decouple from the economy at large and in the same way that immigrant communities did, and actually just enjoy relative prosperity and busy and being busy, having lots of work because we look after each other first. That's exactly what they did, and the results were right there. As a kid, I'd ride around, I could see it with my own eyes.
My grandparents had a few acres in Greenvale, and I think like 10 acres or something. And so funnily, I keep saying wogs. Please know I'm being endearing. I'm not trying to slur, but a lot of the wogs from my school all lived in Greenvale or on the Buller Hill. Like I remember one of my friends in high school, her parents owned the Sunbury KFC, and they had this massive house on Buller Hill. You know, I don't know if you know Buller Hill, but it goes down.
I know of, yeah.
And like, so on the way to my grandparents' house, I would always see all the houses from the people I went to school with, and they're all these like McMansions. And we drive past them exactly like you said, the columns, all the things. And I'd always be like, wow, they're so rich. And then at school, like there was the Aussie kids who grew up in some of the, the rougher parts of Sunbury. And it's funny because the WOG parents, like, those days when you had to bring a dish, all those days in high school. I don't think you're allowed to do that anymore. Because
I never went to high school. Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, guys in the chats, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. There'd be like those international days and everyone had to bring a dish or whatever. And man, I lived for those days because those Greek and Italian nonnas would just walk in with trays and they'd be like, yeah, and then I made this, and then I made this. And you'd see them like, do you remember the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding? And the start of it is her in school and she's opening up her amazing lunchbox full of all this amazing food. And the little brat sitting there with their sandwich going, ew, little bitch.
Yes.
But anyway,
we need to come back to Daniel's comment here because this is the heart. This is really the heart of it. When I talk about abolishing welfare, when I talk about abolishing, social healthcare and all that sort of stuff, what we need to understand is that the minute the government gets involved in any of these things, an enormous amount of money simply goes missing. Not that it's been stolen, but it's been paid to people to be unproductive, and in particular bureaucrats. So Daniel says the biggest cost relating to welfare is the cost of the massive bureaucrats' salaries. Only one of those layers of bureaucracy costs the taxpayer more than every welfare payment combined. I can't vouch for that particular stat, but the principle is correct. An enormous amount of money, the amount of money that we pay into Centrelink is vastly more than the amount of money that the Centrelink pays out in welfare to people. The amount of money that we pay into the socialised healthcare system is vastly more than the amount of healthcare that is actually received. And it all goes missing in those middle layers. I'll give an example from healthcare. Australia has one bureaucrat, and that's defined as a non-frontline, a non-patient-facing role. We have one non-patient-facing role for every 2 patient-facing staff in our hospitals. That is the highest, that is the worst ratio in the world. Most Western countries have less than 1 to 5. And in the more efficient countries that we would look at and say, oh, they've got a really high functioning healthcare system, it can be as low as 1 in 10. We have one bureaucrat in our healthcare system for every 2 frontline workers. And so, of course, we have to pour vast amounts of money into this behemoth. And a huge proportion of that money is disappearing without any patient outcomes being achieved. So this issue of the bureaucracy is a massive one. And it's a large part of the reason why I say things that sound very controversial. Like, yeah, we got to get the government out of healthcare, out of welfare. Most of that money goes missing.
Yeah. And that's the issue. Do you feel like a revolution is brewing?
I don't think Australians have it in them anymore.
No. I'm going to be optimistic. I think that it's going to get to a point where people can no longer tolerate being gaslit by the government. Like, I promise you guys, like, this is Oracle Carls. And when Oracle Carls comes out, she's very rarely wrong. Give it, I'm going to say, what are we, August? November, Jacinda Allen is going to come out with a plan to curb youth crime. And this is going to be how she's going to run for re-election. Because remember, Jacinda was parachuted into her role. She never actually won an election. And this is going to be how she campaigns for the next state election. Mark my words. That's what she's going to run on.
Sorry,
and
I've lost what specifically she's going to run on?
Youth crime, fixing youth crime, bail reform.
Okay.
And I need every single one of you in the chat to remember that when Jacinta comes out and says, oh, look at all these amazing things I'm doing, your job, your obligation is to remind people how long we've been living through it under the hands of Jacinta and make sure they know that going into the polls, because people have very short memories. You know, next year when we're talking about election issues, because Jacinta will start campaigning in the next 2 months, and that's it. Once she's on the campaign trail, you watch that hard hat's going to get a workout. She'll be all in the suburban rail loop. She'll be there.
Oh, yeah.
That's why, and this is my conspiracy. That's why all of our big projects, all of our big infrastructure projects get pushed out. They were all meant to be finished 2 years ago, but they're all going to be finished now in 2026. The Westgate Tunnel, the what do you call it? The Metro Loop. So she'll be there with a little she'll be there with a little hard hat going, look at all the infrastructure we bought. It's a great year for Victoria. You mark my words.
You might be right about that, but I like what DML's got to say here. Jacinta is going to propose that we ban crime. I think that might just work. That might work, you know, if only crime was illegal.
Yeah, weird that. Does Jacinta live in Bendigo? I know that's where she's from and that's where she was elected, but does she have a government residence in Melbourne? Is that how it works? Like, for example, the PMs at Kirribilli? Do they get
I don't believe there's a government, there's a premier's residence at a state level. There is a governor's house, but I don't believe there is one for premiers, no.
So chances are she's going back to her home in Bendigo, which I imagine that she has security and all that sort of stuff. But how can she in good conscience show her face in Bendigo, knowing what's going on in Bendigo at the moment?
I don't know. I mean, cast your mind back not very long. Dan Andrews was getting heckled when he showed up in public, and they were, you know, they had extra security on him and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, he managed to make himself basically invisible except when he wanted to be seen. When he made a public appearance in Box Hill at a Chinese speaking event, and they were very, very quick to basically racially profile people and ban anyone who was white from entering that particular event. So unfortunately, people in power, they have the money, they have the security around them to be able to insulate themselves from the realities that everyone else is having to live, unfortunately.
Are we still paying for Daniel Andrews' private security?
I actually don't know how that works at a state level. I know more about it at a federal level, but I couldn't actually tell you. I know that in Queensland, they are still providing security to former Queensland premiers, but I don't know if that's a universal thing or if that is only for ones that have had specific threats against them. But I do know of former Queensland premiers that do still have state-funded security. But I literally don't know when it comes to Victoria and Dan Andrews.
Yeah, that man cannot show his face in Victoria. Like, imagine being Dan Andrews now. Like, for example, he's got Bike Boy, who's still after him, and that's an amazing case, and I'm excited for that. But not only that, everything that he loves, he can't go and play golf. No one likes that man anymore. He is like literally persona non grata. Where's he going to go?
Well, what's interesting, so I think he and Kevin Rudd have a lot in common in this sense that they so Kevin Rudd, in my opinion, viewed his time as Prime Minister as a job interview, as an audition for the role of Secretary General of the UN. He actually didn't care whether he was liked by the Australian people. He cared whether he was liked in the circles of the UN. And then he later on threw his hat in the ring to try and become the Secretary General of the UN, and that fell flat on its face because he discovered that actually all the people that he thought loved him didn't, and they were just using him, and he was too dumb to have realized that at the time. And I really do think that there's a lot of that with Daniel Andrews as well. He was feathering his nest with the Chinese very, very heavily. And I think now that he's no longer the premier, he's no longer useful to them. And yeah, he's got some investment stuff going on there, but I don't think that his post-politics life is working out quite the way that he had planned. He didn't think that it mattered what Victorians thought of him, because in his mind, this is my opinion, in his mind, I believe he saw himself using that as a stepping stone to then launch into an illustrious, international career, which, as best as I can tell, is not working out very well for him at the moment.
I don't know if you realize, but it's now 9:30, so we've been chatting for 2 hours.
We have been. We just need
short one.
I know. So let's go through. Hang on. Whoa. We hadn't talked about that one. We need to. Okay. So cruel intentions. Albo is recognising Palestine as a state at next month's UN circle jerk. If Aussies aren't rising up by now, nothing will stir it up. I don't think that'll make a lick of difference when it comes to whether or not Aussies stand up. I don't think that's going to move the needle one way or the other. Whether it should is debatable, but I don't think it will, unfortunately. If we haven't stood up already, then honestly, I'm not sure what's going
I
to
think
get us there.
we probably don't have time to talk about this now, but we can talk about it on Wednesday. Recognizing the statehood of Palestine, I don't think that's going to mean anything. I really don't. I don't think that's going to fix the Middle East in any way, shape, or form.
But even Palestinians in Australia are saying the same thing. They're saying this is meaningless. This doesn't have any legs on it. Let's not forget that even Middle Eastern countries are coming out now saying that what's important now is that Hamas is removed from Palestine. This now is Muslim countries, Middle Eastern Muslim countries are coming out saying we need to deal with Hamas. Now, how that needs to be done is open for debate. But recognizing Palestinian statehood here in Australia, I don't think it's going to move the needle one way or the other.
Do you know what
sorry?
I was going to say what I'm fascinated by now is looking at Saudi Arabia. Remember 20 years ago, like that was an untouched place. You didn't go there. Now it's like open to tourism. They're doing all these massive projects. It's really fascinating. And there's all those clips I'll have to find it for Wednesday, but them speaking about how terrifying that fundamentalist Islam is. Like this is literally like Saudi sheikhs were speaking about this and Qataris. I'll find the clip for you guys. And it's so interesting watching bin Solomon, what's his name? Solomon bin Solomon
is his last name. I can't think of his first name. Yeah.
You know guy who I'm talking about, the Sheikh of Saudi Arabia. He is gentrifying Saudi Arabia at a rapid pace. And I think they know that, they can't trade on the oil thing for forever. So they're trying to set up tourism and whatnot. But it's so interesting watching these Middle Eastern countries that were so cut off from the world starting to adopt very Western policies and want to entice Westerners to settle over there. I mean, people are already doing that in Dubai, but Saudi and Oman, interesting.
Now, Saudi was referred to as the kingdom. It is still a kingdom. And there's actually a movie titled The Kingdom that I watched many, many years ago. Of course, it's fiction. It's Hollywood. But yeah, it was a very, very closed place. It was a very, very hostile place to outsiders and to Westerners. And like you say, it's opened up enormously. And we're seeing signs of that. I'm researching Iran at the moment. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a story on this or not, but there are new rounds of protests happening. And of course, go back to 2022, there were some pretty serious protests happening against the Ayatollah and against the Iranian government. Women very bravely coming out and uncovering their heads and doing so in public. And unfortunately, some of them have been executed and many of them have suffered a terrible, terrible fate for that. And the Western world has kind of turned a blind eye. And I can't help but wonder, in light of, people in Australia marching across the Sydney Harbour Bridge with, a big sign of the Ayatollah, that's not going to age very well, I don't think. If in the next 2 or 3 years they get toppled by a popular uprising in Iran, I think that's going to leave a few of our politicians here in Australia with some dancing to do in terms of how they're going to nuance the fact that they marched under his face, in a Western democratic country. We do need to wrap up.
Yes.
Sorry,
I think I told you Clementine Ford came out saying that she won't condemn Hamas and they have a right to defend themselves, and she would have elected Hamas too. She lived in Palestine. Like these people, they're too far gone. This is someone who is a self-proclaimed feminist who's saying that she's on the side of Hamas. Like the cognitive dissonance is out of control.
Yeah. So Word of Rob says, sadly, I'm with Topher on the Vic Public. People pointing out that youth crime prevailed under Jacinta won't be enough to get the masses to wake up. I hope I'm wrong. But I can't shake the disappointment of watching Dan Andrews get re-elected. And that sticks in my memory.
We do really have to be careful with that, because I was in the campaign for Ian Cook, and we did everything we could. We could not have done more to get Daniel to lose his seat. The reason Daniel won is not one was preferences, but two, he had the #1 spot on the ballot. He got all the donkey votes. So people typically go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down the thing. He got a lot of that. He got a lot of flow from preferences. So he didn't win because people wanted him. He won on like the tiniest margin.
I'm going to disagree with you there. If my memory serves me correctly, he won on his own primary. Now, his primary would have included the donkey vote. That's true. But I don't believe he actually needed any preferences. My understanding, if my memory serves me correctly,
32% that he won the vote by. It wasn't much.
Not in his seat. I'd have to go back and have a look. Let's bring this up on Wednesday again. and go back and have a look at the data. My memory says that he won it on his own primary, but we can go back and have a look at the data on that one.
But a lot of where he lives too was a very big enclave of Vietnamese. So
yeah. Well, look, we need to close because our short 1 hour Monday night show was turned into a 2 hour and 10-minute marathon. Thanks everyone for watching. 1,260 of you are still online with us right now. That is absolutely amazing. And thank you for the very, very interesting comments. Thank you for the super chats. Carls, over to you.
A couple of things before we go, a little bit of housekeeping for those of you, 1,200. We do have merch. So if you have not yet, Topher, can you bring up the merch? Can you show the good people the merch?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, thanks for the heads up. Give me a sec.
Yeah, I'll just sit here and look pretty for 5 minutes while you do that. And also, last week, you know how I gave this small shout out to my friend's business who did the water filters?
Yes.
We are terrible that we are not setting a very good precedent as potential advertising people because we didn't give anyone the link. We didn't tell them how to find it. So for any of you who watched Wednesdays, I am now going to post the link in the thing below. So quite a lot of people are like, where's the link? Where's the link? I'm sorry. We will get better at this. And I'm finding it literally right now while Topher does that.
All right.
And
so I've got
also,
some of the, yep.
No, I was going to say, anyone that wants us to shout out your small business, we're happy to. We want to plug small business, but I'm going to give you a little caveat because this did happen in the chat. All of a sudden, everyone was asking us for a discount code. Guys, please, 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 just to support small business without expecting a handout or out expecting more of a discount. It's hard enough as a small business. Like these people just get started asking them for, a discount code. Like I know that a lot of people do that, but I think sometimes it's just nice to support small business too. I could be wrong. You could disagree with me. I'm just saying.
No, I think you're exactly right. All right. So what we're looking at here is the goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com website. We have a bunch of Oddcast merch. It looks freaking sweet. These are all Carly's designs. This is the hoodie, for example, with Tangent Time on the back. Lovely retro color scheme there with a DeLorean. I mean, not a DeLorean because that would be intellectual property. But it's a very, very sweet looking hoodie. Where we're going, we don't need plans. That is the motto of the Oddcast. We just get in and have really fun chats because that's what we used to do without broadcasting it to the world. And now we broadcast it to the world. You will also find my stuff on there, the Topher range, but you're going to find a whole host of different. I love this one, Stay on Tangent. This is for those of us that are old enough to remember the original Star Wars, Stay on Tangent there with the Oddcast. Carly has absolutely knocked these designs out of the park. They are absolutely fabulous. And this one here, I wasn't so sure about this one, Carly, but this has been tremendously popular. This is all just a simulation, right? Carly, you've got your finger on the pulse. This one's been very popular.
I also have a dog here. This is how I know it's time to go because my dog's like, oi, been up here too long.
All right.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's like I have my finger on the cultural post. I know it's cool. I know it's trending. I'm cool. I'm down with
We've
it.
established the fact that I've never been cool. So yeah, don't take my advice. Listen to Carly.
I can't wait till I'm aged out of it though. And I feel like I'm getting there. Soon I'll be like, back in my day.
Speaking of aging out, I'm aging out right now. We've been going for 2 hours and 12 minutes. We need to wrap it up. Carly, you and I will be chatting on Wednesday, and that will be being broadcast on YouTube 7 p.m. Wednesday night. So subscribe to the Oddcast HQ on YouTube so that you'd never miss a live stream or miss a stream from the Oddcast.
Provided that I don't get arrested Wednesday morning when I stand on the steps of Parliament.
You'll be fine, Carly. You'll be just fine. But if you do get arrested, make sure you call me so I know to turn the car around and drive back home, okay?
One more time, guys. Here is the petition. It's only for Victorians. So if you are Victorian, please go jump on the chat there and click the petition.
Yeah.
We need 10,000 votes. So we're going to be plugging that for the next couple of weeks. I believe that the Queensland one, someone brought this up before, the Queensland one has got 60,000 signatures on it now.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. All righty. Fantastic.
All right, peeps.
Carl, always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.
G, make sure you're boiling the kettle.
Bye.